There we go. Ron, once he comes back, lights it up there.
Yeah. We have to start scheduling a lesson at that time.
Yeah, I think you can.
Yes, that's what I ended up doing. I can't leave at 3:30 in the morning, at 4 o'clock.
I took a pickleball lesson at Toxaway last week. I went to a clinic and nobody was there, so I give me a lesson. And I played it before, but boy, having a pro show you what to do, really made a difference. What a fun game.
Yeah.
Ms. Taylor, are we ready to begin?
I believe we are. This is a regular meeting and public hearing being held by the Town Commission of the Town of Gulfstream on Friday, July 8th, 2022 at 9 a.m. in the William F. Coe Jr. Commission Chambers of the Town Hall at 100 C Road, Gulfstream, Florida.
Thank you very much. Please rise and pledge to start.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Vice Mayor Stanley.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Mayor Morgan.
Here.
Also present are the Town Manager Dunham, Assistant Town Attorney Nazaro, Police Chief Allen, myself. Absent with notice are Commissioner Orthwine and Commissioner Lyons.
Thank you very much. We've been presented with the minutes from our last meeting on June 10th. Are there any comments, changes, recommendations?
I move they be accepted as presented.
Much.
Second?
Ms. Taylor?
Vice Mayor Stanley.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes. We've had a couple changes to the agenda. We're going to be moving the auditor's report as item 7, and we have a resolution 22-03, which would be item 11A.
Mr. Mayor, so just to clarify a little on item 7, A is school board member Erica Whitfield that's joining us.
Oh, I'm
And-
sorry.
And so B will be
Let's
the
make that
auditor.
item 7B.
7B, right,
Correct, for the auditor's report.
correct.
Very good. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right, our next meeting is August 12th at 9 a.m. for anyone who wishes to attend. Just by way of notice, September 9th, our meeting will be at 4 p.m. because it will be followed by the tentative budget meeting at 5:01 p.m. That's September 9th for anyone who wishes to attend. Okay, we have school board member Erica Whitfield State. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Erica Whitfield from your school board. I wanted to come see you this morning because I was actually speaking to one of your residents, And he said to me, I said, you know, I usually go and visit all my cities. And so I go up and down in Boynton, Lantana, Lake Worth, and I go and talk to the commissions there every year, and I give them an update on how their schools are doing. And he said, well, why don't you ever come to the island? And I was like, well, you don't have any schools. And, it's a very true story. Well, you do have one, and it's quite well known, but that is not under my purview, unfortunately. So he did bring up the point that you pay a lot of taxes to your schools, and so you deserve to know what's going on with that funding. And so I wanted to remedy this as soon as possible. So I have scheduled to do a presentation to everyone on the island, just to let you know basically who I am, that I'm here, and talk a little bit about your taxes, if that's okay with you. I've been on the board 8 years now, so I've been here quite some time. Absolutely love this job. I think is the most important thing that we do in our community is how we take care of our children and how we make sure that they're educated for our community. The schools are the biggest impact that we as a community can have on our community. We've had a very tough few years. The time during COVID was extremely difficult for us, and even the time recovering from COVID has been very difficult. We actually have some very good news yesterday that I'm just absolutely thrilled about. Following COVID, what has happened in all the communities around the country is we're having all these children come back to us. They're back in the school system. They are being in a building for the first time after a couple of years of being out. Some children, we actually were one of the first places in the country to go back to in-person learning. We went back on September 21st of 2020. It was something that I was thrilled about. I have a 14-year-old. I sent her back to school that day. I was super excited. I said, you have to get out. And my reason behind that was it's very difficult for children, and they're not around each other, and they're not in a formal environment. And being on a computer every day is hard. And so the mental impacts that we are dealing with now from those kids being out for so long are very real. So we are doing a lot to overcome that. The reason I want to say that we had good news yesterday is that the state came out with their grades for the school system for everyone. And so Palm Beach County remains an A district, which really is a testament to what our teachers have done in this last year to recover from this pandemic. So huge kudos to them. One of the reasons that we were so particularly ready to deal with this pandemic is because of Marjory Stoneman Douglas. After Stoneman Douglas tragedy, we came to the voters and we asked you all for additional funds to help us with safety and security, and you were so nice to grant us with that. It is one of the referendums that'll actually be coming up on your ballot again in November. So you'll see it. It's just a reauthorization of the same taxing. It is a 1 mil referendum. That funding actually goes towards safety and security. So all about putting a police officer in every school, making sure that we have video surveillance equipment. We've actually, through our half penny that we shared with you all, we actually were able to make sure we had single point entry. That's a separate referendum that we had. But those funds also made it so that we put in a mental health person in every one of our schools. We call them behavioral health professionals. So every school in the district has one. And the idea behind it was if anybody was going to come in and, the kids are stressed and having an issue, and we start seeing, what could potentially lead into a school shooter much down the line, we want to deal with them early. So that was the thought process behind it. But what it actually did is that all these kids are coming back from the pandemic, dealing with all of these other host of issues, just lots of general stresses, and we have those people there to help them. So we're having lots of interactions with these behavioral health professionals and our students just to get them through and to really get them reacclimated back to school. So it's been a really good thing. The other thing that we had, as I mentioned, we had that funding from the half penny. We were able to purchase computers for every one of our students during the pandemic, which helped keep our kids on task, which is why I think you're seeing that A rating right now and the great grades throughout the school system. Without the funding from the taxpayers in Palm Beach County, we would not have been able to put in that $80 million purchase to buy computers for every student in the district. We had some for some of the kids, but we didn't have enough. So now it has been purchased, and we're slowly working our way through, replacement over time. But really, we've made it so every student has access to a computer, and we're using those in interactive ways within the classroom, along with smart boards that we purchased for everyone. So the teacher is able to really interact with the students, but have them doing work right there on a computer while they're with them. It's actually quite impressive. I think if you saw it, you'd be amazed. So quickly about how schools are funded. You pay 6.875 mils for your schools. It's a ton of money, especially when you're talking about the homes in your community. They're valued so high. That amount of money is actually set by the state. The state decides how much we actually choose for our millage. We have authorization over 1 mil that is outside of the referendum that we did, and we levy to the top amount. We've always done that. That amount of money is such a huge amount that the state actually gives us less money from the state coffers to pay for the schools, which makes us what we're called a donor district. We actually pay for 60% of our schools here in Palm Beach County, whereas other communities may be getting 70% from the state and only paying that 30%. So it depends on how wealthy your community is. The state makes decisions based on that. Because of this, we're a donor community. A huge amount of funds here that you all are raising is going to your schools, even if you don't have kids in the school system. So we appreciate that. The other thing that our property tax 1 mil that we put in has been doing, and this started well before I was in the school system, working in the school system, was we actually had a 0.25, if you remember from years ago, that supported like PE, art, music, and choice programs. Those continue as well during all that time. And then the last thing that we have that's a part of that is teacher pay. As you all know, it's a really difficult time right now to live in Palm Beach County for our families that don't make a lot of money. And so to be competitive with our teachers, we actually give them a portion of that funding into their check every year. So for a teacher who's been there for 10 years, that would be the highest level of service that we recognize. You would get an extra $10,000 in your paycheck every year. So that gives them that bump that really makes us competitive, which is absolutely wonderful for our schools. So overall, the state of Florida is 44th in the country for education funding. So it's pretty low. We're really not a very high recognition from the state level, though more now than it's ever been. We've actually moved up a couple of notches recently. But because of Palm Beach County and the funds that you give us, we are actually able to be really competitive and do a great job. And that's why I think you're seeing this A grade right now. So if you allow me, in the fall, when it gets closer to that election in November, I'd be happy to come back and talk to your residents when I know you have more in town. Everybody's out of town right now. But I'd be happy to come back and talk a little bit more about what's going on that ballot, and what the good things are that we are spending that money on, how the oversight's been done on it, and all those things. But I wanted more than anything just to put my face in front of you, let you know that I'm here. If you all have any questions about your schools, any questions about the school system in general, I would be happy to answer questions now or anytime in the future. But thank you so much for having me here, and I'll be open for anything that you have right now.
Well, thank you very much, Erica. Appreciate the report, and also the enthusiasm you show for your position. And
Love it.
Actually, my son attended public school in Palm Beach County, so I was very interested in what you had to say.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, if anybody wants to contact me, erica.whitfield@palmbeachschools.org. I'm always here to help you in any way that I can. Thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the auditor's report. Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, thank you for once again allowing me the opportunity to come talk about your most recent audit for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2021. If you haven't seen the report, it's probably on your website by now. I think you probably have hard copies on the commission, but it's available to the public. If it's not already on the Auditor General's website, it will be, and the town puts it on their website, so it's available to everyone. Just briefly, I'll say that within the confines of this document, there are actually 4 reports. There's an opinion on the financial statements, which is required in all audits. And again, the town got a clean opinion. There's a report on internal control and compliance, which is required by government auditing standards. Again, the town got a clean report. There's a management letter required by the Florida Auditor General. There were no untoward items that we had to cite. They have kind of a boilerplate list of things you have to check and then comment on them, whether it's positive or negative. The final report's the final page in the document. It's an attestation report on the town's compliance with Florida statutes, chapter 218.415, which is the investment statute. It says what investment vehicles local government entities in the state of Florida can invest their surplus funds in. And again, we found the town was in compliance with that. I've made a little handout. Hopefully, all the commission has one. So 5-year comparison. I compare the revenues and expenditures on the governmental funds. We look at the fund balance, and then we'll look at the utility fund. The first page is actually page 2 after the cover page. Your revenues increased from 6.2 million to 6.7 million for combined for all the governmental funds. That was an increase of about 493,000. The bulk of that was in miscellaneous revenues, which is kind of an unusual place to get a huge increase, 378,000 of that. But 360,000 of that was the payment from AT&T as a result of the ruckus the town had with them over the years. Licenses and permits went up. That's building permits. As construction and the price of construction has skyrocketed, the value of building permits has gone up. Fines and forfeits decreased significantly by over 100,000. What happened was the prior year was an unusual year, and it's kind of returned back to a normal level. So overall, you had almost an 8% increase in total governmental revenues. If you go to page 3, you can see this graphically. I like the pictures better myself. You can kind of see the trend, and the expenditures have been, or revenues have been fairly stable for the last 5 years. The only difference much this year was that payment from AT&T. Page 4 is the flip side of the coin, the expenditures. This is the money going out. We've been looking at the money coming in. In the governmental funds, your expenditures increased almost 556,000. That's about 10% there also. The big increase was in streets and physical environment. There was a significant drop in capital outlay as the undergrounding project wound down, and the drainage project hasn't hit full stride yet. And general administrative dropped off significantly. So overall, about a 10% increase in expenditures. Again, on page 5, you can see this in a graphical context. You can see the trend. It's been upward a little bit each of the last 3 years, dropped off from 17 and 18. And then fund balance, that's your net worth or your equity, if you will, if you were in a for-profit business. And we're looking at the general fund, and in governmental entities, they have multiple types of fund balance. You can see over on the left, we have unassigned, assigned, restricted, non-spendable. Unassigned is the kind you'd like to have. That can be used by the town for any lawful purpose at the discretion of the commission. And the town has 7.6 million, which if you look down below a little bit, you'll see total expenditures for 21 were about 5.7 million. So you have more than one whole year's worth of unassigned fund balance. And the reason for that is, as you're all aware, is you're gearing up for a major capital improvement program that's going to go on for several years. And this is the funding that hopefully will allow you to not have to take on any debt in order to fund that program. Speaking of debt, the undergrounding loan was actually paid off. It was on April 1st, I believe, the last payment. So as of now, the town has no debt. You're debt free. You can look at the trend on the fund balance in the graph on page 7. You can see it's been building up in anticipation of this capital improvement program, which I think is excellent financial management. Most folks go out and borrow the money and build the stuff, and then they pay for it for the next 20 years. You have saved the money, and now you're going to spend it over the next several years. Financially very prudent. Last exhibit is a 5-year summary of the income statement for the utility fund, the water enterprise fund. And this year, there was a big drop off in the net income. The revenues are fairly stable. They decreased 1%, kind of in the noise level. But the big flyer here was the water purchases, and they increased almost 190,000. And I believe the reason for that were some major breaks in the water lines that created huge losses of water that you purchased but were not able to sell because of the breaks in the water line. The rest of the expenditures were fairly stable. So you still had a change in net position. That's your net income, if you will, of 202,000. It just happened to be a lot more than the prior year. So in spite of that, you still turned a reasonable profit. With that, I'd be glad to try and answer any questions. And again, if you have a question next week, next month, 6 months from now, give me a call. I'll be glad to talk with you about it at length. And if I can't answer it on the phone, I'll be glad to come out and meet with you individually or as a group at any time.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions? Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
Succinct and thorough. All right, let's move on. Any public comment? Mr. Ganger?
Yes.
Welcome.
I saw an article in the postal, in the coastal, or no, actually it was in the Post, about Ellie's Diner, which is shutting down tomorrow. And the thought occurred to me that it was in Ellie's Diner that the undergrounding project started in 2005. We had one of our board members of the coalition, of the Civic Association, said that we really ought to be helping the people from an Ohio and Kentucky firm who had come down to Florida to bail us out after a horrible hurricane in 2005. This is not something that people tend to remember, but we decided that no one was really thanking these folks. And the Civic Association decided to invite them to a luncheon at Ellie's, and the budget was $1,000 and the luncheon cost $999. Everyone from the team came, and we had, they had a wonderful time. And they left the next day to drive back to Ohio and Kentucky, where they were headquartered. Their president, and I don't remember his name, was so grateful that he called me and said, "What can I do for you? I really am appreciative." It turned out that he was moving full-time to Jupiter, Florida. And he said, you know, you could save a lot of grief if you buried your cable, your overheads, because you're very vulnerable in a place like Gulfstream. And the Delray had told us that they would start fixing us a month after the hurricane. So that meant everyone in town would be without power for at least 30 days. And these guys got it fixed in 3 or 4 days. So I asked him, well, you know, what could we do? And he said, bury your overheads. And he said, I'm the mayor of Jupiter starting as soon as I retire, which is in a couple of weeks. Come on up to Jupiter and we'll show you how to do it. And I went up to Jupiter in 2005, and that was the beginning of the underground project. I think it's useful to understand from an historic perspective how long it's taken and all the turns and twists that you all have endured. For a while, I was enduring it on my own as head of the Civic Association. But eventually the town joined in. If you recall, we had a vote. The vote was contentious because one building in the town decided to vote 100% against undergrounding. But we pulled it off. And I recognize that you all, and I'm sure you'll probably make some mention of the current status, but we're awfully, awfully close to finalizing the project. And I honestly believe it was the right thing to do. I believed it when I started the project, and I believe it today. But we'll only find out when we have another hurricane, and we'll see just how well the system can be put back together again. And I really want to thank you in particular for what you do, what you've had to do. It's been an enormous task. I realize that, with complications that we never anticipated at the outset. The people in the south part of town got a break because we executed our plan, and your house and my house were underway within budget and, within literally months. The north end of town has been a little more difficult. But because of the undergrounding, we were able to connect with the folks who lived in the pocket. And they helped pay for the process. And obviously, they benefit from having undergrounding in their community. So as a historian, I think every once in a while you ought to step back and say, what did we do? How did we do it? And what was the outcome? What we did, I thought, was extremely well done. The outcome took a lot longer than we had ever anticipated. But I guess you're going to tell us, but in a couple of minutes or hours, we're going to be completely finished with the process. And we've learned a great deal as a community on dealing with a major capital issue. And, obviously that's going to benefit us in the future. So well done. Well done.
Well, thank you, Bob. I don't think there's any question. It took longer and was more expensive than we anticipated, but in the long run, it's certainly going to be worth it. And credit goes to you, because it would not have happened without your leadership to initiate the project.
Thank you.
So kudos to you.
Every once in a while, I say, what the hell am I doing?
Anyone else? If not, let's move on then to the public.
I think Mr. Burns is.
Oh, sorry.
I got her later. I'm sorry. I just have one question.
Yeah, come on up to the mic.
Bob Burns. I live at 3312 North Ocean Boulevard, which is on the corner of A1A and Lakeview Drive. And I brought this up a few times. I've discussed it with the chief. And my question is, has there been any more discussion? Is there any thought of doing a feasibility study or anything with the idea of perhaps making Lakeview one way in and maybe Banyan one way out? I can tell you, because I'm outside all the time working in the yard and so forth, that even though I know a ticket was just given yesterday to a truck, they're in the day that 5 or 6 trucks don't go by and go on Lakeview. And it's not necessarily that it's such a big deal, but it's a big deal when there's 2 cars there or somebody's trying to make the turn, whatever. It's also a big deal when school's in session, particularly in the afternoon pickup where there's cars lined up all the way on Lakeview and all around the corner and all. So I'm just wondering if there's been any more discussion or possibility of thinking about maybe doing some kind of study or something about perhaps doing something about making it one way.
It has been reviewed. We defer to the police to evaluate that. And I know it's been discussed on at least 2 occasions as to how best to handle traffic in the core. And the way it is done now with such limitations as there are on the school and traffic coming in and out for the kids at school, I think the decision is to keep it the way it is.
That's always been our belief as the police department, because we look deeper into things than what you see on the surface, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate for you, you live there, have to go through this.
Okay, basically I brought it up a while ago and it's kind of just been there. So I just thought I would ask again. So if you all discussed it and said it's not a good idea, You're not hurting my feelings. I just wanted you to know.
No, I appreciate
I
it.
was interested.
I wanted you to know, we didn't disregard it. We've discussed it on several occasions. And actually, the school will be bringing forth a plan to redirect their ingress and egress from the school as well, which should help somewhat. Okay, let's move on then to the public hearing of 996 Pelican Lane. Any ex parte communications?
None here.
Okay, thank you very much. Whoever's going to speak, please rise and be sworn.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Okay, welcome. Who would like to present the application?
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Romer with Obus Homes, and I'm representing Mississippi Hotels. We're basically introducing this house and asking for approval to build beautiful house in the North-South District zone in 996 Pelican. It's a two-story house, 4-bedroom, 2-car garage with a beautiful pool in the back. We took inspiration on the Anglo-Caribbean style for this house. We're seeking, the approval to build this house, even though we're, going through a very particular, situation with the property. And we're asking for 3 variances to be able to build this house.
Now, why do you think you're entitled to the variances?
It's mostly specific, with the particular situation with the property. I think, Chris, our attorney, is going to explain a little bit better his findings about the property.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning,
Morning.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. I have a presentation I'd like to give on the variance itself. So my presentation is limited to the legalities of that, to inform the commission and educate on the issues at hand. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Christopher Bernardo on behalf of the Pajotas. So if you have a, or do you want to just go on? Okay, next one, please. So what we're asking the commission to consider are 3 variances, which, as I'll explain momentarily, it's all associated with a single issue here. The relief requested is to first reduce the minimum rear setback for the home from 30 feet to 21 feet. The second is to increase, or should I say decrease, the minimum floor area ratio from 33%, which the code requires, to 35.25%. And the last point, that's actually the variance is to reduce the pool setback. The code requirement is not 20 feet for this property, it's actually 10. So we're asking to reduce it from 10 feet to 2 feet. The justification letter that's of record asks the 10. I believe at the ARB hearing, there was a misconception that the 20-foot rule would apply, but it's 2 feet. And I'd like to get into, this is all associated with a single issue on the property. Next slide, please. Oh, the other, there you go. Okay, so this is 996 Pelican Lane. It is the last property along the yacht basin canal. I say yacht basin because that's a City of Delray Beach owned yacht basin. Very relevant to our discussion, the fact that 996 Pelican Lane borders the town limits. And you will see there, we are the last lot on the canal. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we're really talking about is a single issue. And if you see by the illustration here, 996 Pelican Lane is actually consisting of 2 separate parcels of land. There's the primary parcel that the house is on that borders Pelican Lane. Then there is a 707 square foot sliver of land that is filled land. This sliver of land, we're going to call that parcel 2 for the sake of the rest of my presentation. It's filled land. It is the land, it's contiguous with the residence. So by visual inspection of the property, there is no indication of any kind of property line. This is a single parcel of land. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, so that sliver of land is the seawall that borders the waterway. And it's pre-existing. This is not something that was recently built on the property. Next slide, please. On inspection upon approval of the development, a few things were discovered about this sliver of land. This sliver of land is actually outside of the town city limits. The city limits of the town is along parcel 1, which is the primary parcel. Together, the two parcels consist of approximately 10,917 square feet. 707 square feet of that parcel, I'm calling parcel, I'll say the residence, 707 square feet is this small sliver of land. It's outside of the city of town of Gulfstream. Upon inspection, upon inquiry with the city of Delray Beach, a very unusual, unique situation was discovered. One that I haven't seen on any property to my knowledge in the area. And that is that neither is this piece of property part of the city of Delray Beach. And going back all the way to the original parcel, the dedication and the conveyances to the city of Delray Beach for the yacht basin, in concluding with the city attorney for Delray Beach, they showed me that this parcel was never conveyed to the city. So for all intents and purposes, we have this small parcel of land. Next slide, please. This small parcel of, sorry, the other way. This small parcel of land that is in essence a lost parcel. And upon information and belief, it would be in the purview of the county of Palm Beach. So in looking back in our original discussions with the Madam Clerk, we did some back parcel searching to see where this would come. And it was quite evident that the chain of title on this property goes all the way back to 1950, as far back as we can tell. What we couldn't tell is when this piece of land was actually added, but we, from information and belief and from discussions with the clerk and from other sources, it's believed that that parcel has existed there since probably the 1980s and somewhere in that realm. Next slide, please. So I think the best way to address the variance request, there are 8 requirements that the town has for you to grant a variance. And I think it's very important and relevant. It fits perfectly into what a variance request would call for, is to go through all 8 of those. And the first condition, the first finding and standard you must meet is fine today, is that the special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to this site and not applicable to other sites. I don't think there could be anything more unique. We have searched not only in the town of Gulfstream, but in area towns and area waterways. This is a very unique parcel of land. Parcel 1 and parcel 2 are a single residential parcel of land. So operably, and if you'll see, this is a different photo. This is a Google Earth photo. I think it's a little more telling what we're dealing with. This isn't, in essence, practically a separate parcel of land. It is a single residential parcel of land in the town of Gulfstream. Both parcels are filled upland, so there's no indicator of a separate property line or separate use.
Excuse me, Mr. Bernardo, is the 707 square feet, is that the seawall, or does that also include some of the grass area?
Yeah, so it does include a little of the grass. If you go back to 2 slides back, the 2 slides back is, and it's very difficult to see, but that is the property appraiser's indication. Again, this is not perfect, but you'll see later on, I'll have, it's also shown on the survey for the property. This gives you a good visual of where that property is. It's about 9 feet back from the seawall, approximately, which is 9 feet. That is, and you'll see most of our variance requests asking for this 9 feet. So it's approximately 9 feet of land back from the seawall. The seawall is located along the southern end of this parcel to this sliver of land, but that gives you a little better indication of that. And later on in the slide, I think you'll also see I have a snapshot of the survey that shows you the actual land. Okay, so I use this photo because it gives you a little more visual indication of what we're dealing with. This, again, This is not a separate, I'm sorry, one more slide back. So there are several unique aspects to this. Again, it's a contiguous piece of land. Neither parcel can be used separately. So we're not talking about a neighboring property that someone else can use or do anything with. In all respects, these two parcels are codependent and are a single residential parcel of land. Parcel 1 and parcel 2 have never been separately used parcels. Okay, so we're going to call this a lost parcel. And then the second requirement that you have to find as a commission is that the special conditions and circumstances have not resulted from the actions of the applicant. Certainly the Pahodas did not cause this scenario. They bought this property about a year ago. And this condition has, again, as I've discussed, has existed. The field land, from what our investigation reveals, likely existed since the 1980s, but the parcel of land dates all the way back at least to the 1950s. So the Pahodas had no involvement in this land. In fact, the scenario that's painted before them is a tremendous hardship on their ability of use of the land. So the third requirement that you have to find is that granting the variance will not confer upon the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other lands and structures and buildings in the same zoning. So again, as I discussed, we did look, and these photographs are samples of area yacht basins, and they don't show all of the yacht basins in the town of Gulfstream. From our knowledge and from our investigation of the town as a complete, there's no other scenario that matches this one. Yes, some of these are yacht basins and have borders, but we have a few unique circumstances. Again, you're talking about a town limit, and you're talking about a parcel that is neither in the town nor the neighboring city. It's a very unique circumstance.
Doesn't that create the special benefit? You're incorporating non-Gulfstream property into Gulfstream's zoning, FAR regulations, and setback determinations.
So we're not asking you to incorporate that land. Certainly we're not asking that. But what we are asking is that the land itself is treated no different than other lands. And what we're talking about is a waterway setback. Every one of the variance requests considers, the purpose of the code is to consider the land and the waterway itself. The reality of that structure is that the waterway is where it is, just as the neighboring properties are considered from the waterway. So what we are asking for is that you treat this property just like all the other neighboring properties and treat it from the waterway, which is the proper use of the land. We're not asking to incorporate that land, but we are asking for the calculations to be considered within that.
Yeah, but the calculations include non-Gulfstream property.
Correct, and the reason is because that is the land as a whole. And if I can show you on the next slide, next slide down. Okay. Again, with that argument, what we are asking for is precisely that. The actual land and property comprising the effective residential lot should be considered when determining setbacks and floor area ratios, just as it is applied in each of the zoning districts. What we're looking for is the land that comprises the residential lot. Secondly, a waterway setback is intended to be, by the code, and is for other properties, a setback from the waterway. And in fact, the next, if you may, next slide.
Excuse me, it looks like though that did they pull a building permit to build that seawall out there? It almost looks like someone intentionally grabbed part of the water and made additional land for their property. Permitted by the city of Delray at that time? Do we know?
So that's an interesting question, and in investigation with the clerk and the town manager, and in our own investigation, we went back as far as possible. We cannot conclude whether there was a permit pulled or not pulled. There were various developers that owned this property over the years, and certainly that home was built at some time. I don't think it was conclusive on behalf of the town, and certainly we had done that investigation before we came before you to find that, and certainly that would have been a factor. We do know, on information and belief, that seawall and that construction existed for as much as 40 years from now, maybe more. So if that construction was done, not recently, predates the records that were available to conclude whether there was a permit pulled or not for that. And that's upon our information prior to. I don't know, we're not able to answer the question, but I agree with you, that would be very important to know. We do know, and I think it's factors that not only was it 40 years, but there are several owners in that time period between that scenario. So, and I think that some of your answers, Mr. Mayor, I think the question you asked was what we're asking, and I think that goes to the, I'm sorry, is the application of the literal interpretation of the regulations. And the next question you have to ask goes to your inquiry. Describe which literal interpretation of the regulations would deprive the applicants of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties subject to the same zoning. So again, under the town code, for the purposes of calculating the rear setback, pool setback, and the floor area ratio, parcel 2 under the literal interpretation is excluded as it is outside the town limits. Next slide. So what are we saying? How are we saying that it's the literal interpretation? Here what we see is a survey, and this represents the plans that are currently within the property. So what happens if we literally interpret the code? If we literally interpret the code, we have a number of unintended results that we proffer to this commission are not the intent of the town, not intent of the code itself. And the first one is that the effective setback from the waterway, if we give literal interpretation of code, gives us a 39-foot setback from the water. If we are to not grant the variance, that pool would be effectively, the house would be effectively 39 feet. And likewise, the pool would place the pool at 13 feet beyond the waterway. The effective floor area ratio, again, the intent of the FAR is to consider the lot of land in the property for purposes of grass and building coverage. With the literal interpretation, you come to a 35.25 floor area ratio. The effective interpretation is actually below the 33%. It's at the 32.97%. And at those illustrations, the arrows show where, and actually the house in this illustration would be off the map. It would be 39 feet back, and certainly it would be behind the current structure. I think it's very relevant. It would be behind the current structure that is at the home at this time. Next slide. So I think a very important point to make here is also what happens with the literal interpretation. And this is not what we were asking, but I think it's a very important point. That if we're going to take a literal interpretation of the code has two different setbacks for waterway. And I think this is important to note about the purpose of what that setback is. And the literal interpretation of the code, parcel 1 is not a waterway lot. So if we are to say that we are not to include parcel 2 in the calculations for a setback, then we must also say that parcel 1 is not a waterway lot, because it doesn't boundary a waterway, it boundaries a land parcel. And if we take that into account, the setback under the town code is 20 feet, not 30 feet. So what we would say is that the argument can't be made both ways. We cannot say that parcel 2 cannot be considered at all in the calculation or effective calculation or the practical calculation of this land and the construction, and at the same time also call parcel 1 a waterway lot, because then it's not a waterway lot. It boundaries a land lot. And again, the setback for a land lot is not 30 feet. Under the code, it's 20 feet. We don't even need the variance for the setback. And next slide, please. The next requirement for you to make is that the variance is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of land. Absolutely. The structure that is being proposed, the structure in the picture is the existing home, the home that has existed on the parcel. The structure that is proposed would leave the lot is precisely the last line of, as if you would consider, and that's the way the designs have put in, if you are to consider effectively the use of that land within the calculation, the setbacks, there would be no variance required. So the home is proposed at a 30-foot setback from the water, and the pool is proposed at more than a 10-foot setback from the water, as is the floor area ratio is within the 33% requirement if you consider that land. So we aren't asking anything more than the minimum that would be required for that consideration. Excellent. Granting the variance would not permit to be established or reestablished any use prohibited in that zone district. There is no request to permit any use which is prohibited in the north-south single-family residential district. The requirement does not apply to our request. Next. The seventh is granting the variance is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies and future land use map of the adopted comprehensive plan. Well, that's all that we're asking for. We're asking for this house, this home, this new home to be treated no differently than all of the others, taking into account the land that's available for construction. And what the intent of the code is to have setbacks from the waterway. That's the defined purpose. So
Are you asking for the non-Gulfstream property to be incorporated into the calculation for FAR?
We're asking for that to be considered. We're asking for a variance, and under the rules, we're asking for you to consider practically that land is there, but what we're asking for is the variance to increase the minimum floor area ratio to 35.25%. So I would assume, practically speaking, it's the same argument.
Right, you're gonna make a larger house by incorporating non-Gulfstream property into the floor area ratio, right?
We're looking to apply the floor area ratio to the actual land that's there.
Right.
So I understand. The argument is the same, but we're not asking for a footprint of land that's any larger than you would consider on a piece of land that exists there. So our So what we would argue in the inverse is that a denial of the variance would result in the misapplication of the code, as I just argued, because what you'd be doing is having an unintended reduction of the buildable footprint on the parcel, the omission of a pool, as well as a 39-foot waterway setback. That house would be set back 39 feet from the waterway. So that the last requirement is that granting the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of existing regulations, will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to public welfare. I think the argument's all the same here. Granting the variance will allow the harmonious treatment of the properties along Pelican Lane and the zoning district. Each property will be afforded a 30-foot structure setback and a 10-foot pool setback from the waterway, as it's intended, and an allowable floor area ratio based upon the actual parcel of land. So we're asking for that to be considered. The purpose of these codes is to consider the parcel of land that's there. And I just want to conclude with saying, I know that you brought up the proper questions about this parcel of land. That parcel of land needs, and may not be relevant today, but the Pahotas are willing, as through my help, our opinion on this parcel of land is that this cannot remain this way. And I think it also addresses some of your concerns. And I didn't think this was relevant today, but you've addressed the right question. And the question is that this parcel of land should be part of this town of Gulfstream. Again, it's not, if it was the city of Delray Beach, we would have a different issue. And the original plan would have been to go to the city of Delray Beach and get a permit for whatever we had to do. There's no one to even address this. And I think this is a problem, and we've discussed it with the town attorney. We think this is a problem that can't go unresolved. Our intent is to rectify the problem, making this variance that we're requesting here then become the right thing to do. That parcel of land should be annexed to the town of Gulfstream. And I think that's the eventual right thing to do with the help of the town, which I'm willing to work with the town attorney and county attorney to see that that's happened. This is a problem that will not go away unless it's addressed. Again, we've looked extensively in neighboring towns and cities. We don't see a problem. We don't see an issue that has come up anywhere similar to this. course, there's all missed parcels on plat edges, nothing of this unique nature. So I'm happy to answer any of the questions. I know you had a few questions on this,
No,
but
you've done a very thorough evaluation of this, and it's truly a unique application. There's no
Yeah.
question about it. Property is not in Gulfstream, however, it's not annexed. You do make an interesting argument on the land setback. That is, it's a grounded property. It's not a water property. If you're going to treat the 700 and some square foot as separate land, is it not then a landed piece of property, not waterfront?
right.
Anyways,
Yeah,
questions?
could you go over that again? What happens if we treat it that way? Would the house you propose be able to be built in the same location if we treated it as a non-waterfront property?
You wouldn't need the rear setback for the structure. The code, the town code states that interior lots only have a 20-foot rear
Right.
setback. So if it's considered, and again, if it's considered an interior lot, which we believe you have to have one of the arguments.
Right.
If it's considered an interior lot, we wouldn't need the variance for the rear setback.
Yeah,
It wouldn't affect it.
but it would affect the FAR. But we have
Only the other two.
you still have the FAR, so then we're still building too big of a house on the interior lot.
Yeah.
Correct.
But just if I may, reading the design guidelines, the intent of the FAR is to build a house that is proportional to the land where it sits. Basically, the land is parcel 1 and 2. Legally speaking, there's a line there that becomes two, municipalities basically. So the intent of having a proportional house to the property is still there with the FAR that we currently have. So we're not trying to make something bigger to the property that is there. If that helps, the argument.
I didn't read the minutes from the FAR, the Architecture Review Board, but the question would have been raised about comments from neighbors. Were there comments from, there's 3 very close neighbors to the property. Was there any comments at all? Trey, do you remember?
I mean, we did receive a comment from someone that generally said that it was too large and inconsistent with the neighborhood, but that was all that we received. And it was just a phone call.
I had a couple comments. One, it's not ex parte, but I did have this property under contract about 14 years ago, so I'm familiar with it. Luckily, I never went far enough to get into the parcel 2 issue, but I can't confirm that. I think it's common knowledge the house is at this point beyond its useful life for a number of reasons. So, I mean, that goes without saying. If someone says, well, why is there new construction? I can pretty much confirm even 12, 13 years ago, the house was, on borrowed time, unfortunately, because it's, it's a nice 1-story house and it's almost fits the current town code, but that's neither here nor there. Chris, where are you? I don't envy these phone calls, and I know when you get them, and I know you've done a lot of work on this. Where are you on parcel 2? I mean, do you all have color or title? Was that conveyed to your client when he purchased it, or are you considering a quiet title suit? What have you talked to Trey about?
It was a conveyed parcel together as a single deed. It's insured.
Yeah.
There's title insurance on it. So no scenario or problem was disclosed by the seller. I don't know if the seller at that time even knew of the issue. The seller was, I believe, a developer that didn't have anything with the property. But no, it was not treated as it was a single conveyance.
Okay.
And it's insured title. I mean, obviously, this is not really a title insurance issue, but it wasn't like a seller, like quick claim deed of that nature. It was a.
Is there a unity of title?
I don't believe so.
Did we ask for one?
Yeah, I don't know if we have. I don't know if there was a title, and I think that we left it as a development issue if that was part of it. I think that's originally where it came up from. It was a.
All right, and then so if you're gonna, I mean, I could conceivably see that you could use this even though it's an oddity, and I've had the other issue where there's certain parts in Delray where the yard goes out in the ICW and it's not where they dredged.
Yeah.
So everything's got to back up off of the line, even though you've got 20 more feet of yard going to the water, plus your seawall and dock, which none of it's insurable, and you're getting permits for that. So what do you, have you talked to staff? I know, Trey, you can weigh in, or what are you proposing? I think the mayor's where he's going here, of course, he can kick me under the table if he wants, is, okay, so if you own this parcel, and it's not in Gulfstream, I mean, it seems to me that there has to be some, you're just talking about annexing it, you've got title, you're good, you're not gonna do a quiet title suit, you're not gonna seek resolutions and deeds from Delray and the county and from Gulfstream. We're just talking about whether or not you do anything with it by including it in the town of Gulfstream. I'm a little bit,
Well,
I spent 50 hours on this
I
like
got
this, so.
I think that we don't know all the answers to that. We do have legal title of that property. So the only issue that we can conclude now is that that parcel is not within the town of Gulfstream. The other evidence is partial circumstantial evidence. I did see from the city of Delray Beach enough to conclude, on my opinion, that that parcel is definitely not within the city of Delray Beach conveyance of the yacht basin. Where we go from there, I don't know, but I'll know that whatever resolution, I would believe, I would estimate that something has to be done. And I would proffer that that's relevant here, because if it is done and they've already constructed a house, then the issue becomes moot. Now, that would be a tremendous hardship to them. And if that is, that's really where we're going with it. I don't know all the answers, but I do know that I wouldn't be able to make all the decisions. It would be something I would have to work on in conjunction with the town of the right thing to do. I don't, I could give the reasons why I think it's a good idea, but that's not really my
Yeah, and the
call.
seawall here is actually, and again, we had another issue on this basin where we had a 40-year-old dock that was unpermitted, which is not in a different town than this one. So I'm kind of familiar with the basin. So the issue here too, also the seawall is within parcel 2. It's not sitting on the outside of the property.
No, and that is another, you're correct, Tom, that's another issue that has to be tackled, because we have the possible need to do repairs or replacement of that seawall. So where do we go for that? I mean, there's a series of, and that does affect town property on the stability of the land, the buildability of the land. Where do we go and how do we deal with that seawall? So I think the more you dive into it, it's quite clear that this is an issue just as much in the town's interest as the property owners, of what we actually do with this property. And we don't know all the answers yet. I think that we do know is that at this point in time, we feel the variance would be the right way to deal with it. It would give us the right way to incorporate that land into the right use of the town. Again, I don't want to talk for the town. Obviously, that's the town attorney and the commission to make that decision. But it would appear to me from the property owner's side that is within the town's interest to be involved in rectifying the problem.
If it's not quite yet. So I have to look at this literally, as you can tell from my questions. And it seems to me that we deal with the property that is within the town of Gulfstream. Whether it should be part of Gulfstream, this plot 2, whether it will be at some point, or whether it won't be. Whether you have to repair the seawall at some point, and that requires you to eliminate the seawall, I don't know. We have to deal with what we have right now, and that's lot number 1. I can be persuaded for your rear setback, as it is a grounded property. It's not waterfront property. If you're going to take the position that lot number 2 is a separate piece of property, not in the town of Gulfstream, and that's the waterfront, not this one, you can make an argument that you should be treated. It's not even a variance, frankly. You should be treated as a non-waterfront property for rear setback. That being said, I can't go along with enlarging the size of this house based on non-Gulfstream property. And even if you had the property, it doesn't fit within that district, that neighborhood. It's going to create a house that is disproportionately large for the rest of the homes. And we're very interested in this town in maintaining consistency of building size. Not too big, not too small, trying to maintain that integrity of the neighborhood architecture. This, I think, would violate that, and violate it in a way that's based on non-Gulfstream property. So I can't go along with the variance. I think it violates 3, 4, 5, and 8, in my opinion, for those reasons. Yes, sir.
May I speak, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, sure. Please just identify yourself for the record.
Yes. So my wife and I bought this property for us to retire into on the verge of retirement. And, when we bought the property, we certainly just bought it as run property, right? It really only has one use, that sliver parcel, it is useless without the rest of the property. When we got the deed and we reviewed the deed before buying the property, it says Gulfstream on the top. The address is 996 Pelican Lane, Gulfstream on top of the deed. And then the deeds are a bunch of numbers. And we had no knowledge that they were not both Gulfstream properties. I certainly understand, your concerns, but, I hope that you could also think about concerns from my standpoint as a Gulfstream resident. Either way, I'm a Gulfstream resident, and the practicality of the situation versus just, a literal interpretation. Hoping that you could, put yourself in a homeowner's shoes and, of a person that has spent a lot of money to reside in Gulfstream and thought that one of the primary reasons of coming to Gulfstream was that it was a great little town with, a nice and friendly, accepting culture. To me, not allowing us to build a house that, maximizes the use of the entire property, which is functionally one property, as Chris was pointing out, it really harms us as a Gulfstream resident. And, building the house we're looking to build is only like a 3,000 square foot house. It's not, we're not building some McMansion there. It'll fit really well into the neighborhood. I know that Richard at the planning meeting showed the other houses in the neighborhood that are around there. This is and will be a smaller house in that Pelican Lane neighborhood. It's not out of character. The house next to it that's in Delray is, to the east, is a smaller house, but that's on a, odd little lot that doesn't abut the water at all. The property at the end, which is close to us, is a very large house. I don't know what that is, but it's got to be, 5,000 square feet, something like that, for 4,500. We're not asking to build a McMansion there. We're asking to build a 3,000 square foot house. And by not allowing us to consider the whole property we own, which we thought was all in Gulfstream, and had no way of knowing was not all in Gulfstream. That would cause us to build a house that's like 200 and something square feet smaller. We're already building, we'd like to be building a larger house than what we are building, but we're fitting it into the zoning requirements based on the entire property that we own. And we don't, honestly, I feel like I'm being harmed as a resident of Gulfstream. I don't think any of my neighbors are being harmed. It'll be a much nicer situation than what they currently have. It's going to be a much nicer house, and it's going to look a lot better on that entire lot than what is there. I just ask you to put yourself in my shoes as a resident of Gulfstream and trying to do, what I can to build, a house that does fit the requirement, that fits the requirements on one property, which I think it really is. And if you don't think it's really one property, I'd ask you to go there before making a decision and take a look at it, and then say that you really think somebody else in Gulfstream is being harmed, because I don't think anybody in Gulfstream is being harmed.
No, it's not a question of harm. It's a question of granting variances. Variances are very, very difficult to get, and I'm afraid that by trying to incorporate that property to increase your FAR, that's not a justification for the variance. I think it misses a number of the elements required for a variance that I've identified. You do make a persuasive argument, however, on the non-waterfront
But
rear setback. So you are still allowed to build a nice home on the Gulfstream property. I mean, it'll still be a fine home. So you're not being harmed.
Well, I'm sorry, let me. So from my standpoint, I'm going to have to take out like a room or make a room much less functional in the house to eliminate 200 square feet.
Let me try to, if possible, and what the homeowner's argument is, maybe it would be relevant before you make your decision on a view of some of the development of itself, the product itself. I don't know if we have.
Well, yeah, we haven't moved to that issue
Right.
yet, which I think you'll find challenging.
Okay, I think that's probably, I would ask that you consider in the development itself, is that consideration, because that's the final result is really the home that's going to be there. And I think that's what Mr. Pahota is requesting, that you consider the home that's being built.
Have you made it is just 200. How many square feet would the home have to be reduced in size to conform without a variance if we considered a non-waterfront lot?
324.
About 300. He's saying 200. What do we know the real number?
Well, it's a different, I think it depends on which variance, there's different calculations from whether you consider the rear setback or as opposed to the FAR. And even the pool, if you consider the pool, I would think that might change the resulting positioning and layout of the house. So I think it depends on which one, if any of all or three, that you would grant. And Mr. Mayor.
But do you want us to rule on the variances first and then decide whether you want to move forward with the home?
I would think that the consideration should be with what's going to be constructed there. I think it would be helpful to the commission to consider that, because that's the resulting, that's the result of your decision. So we would ask that you consider the home, the development of the home and the development application as a whole with the variance requests.
All right, let's move on to that then, unless there are other questions on the variance.
One quick question. I guess this is more for Trey. When we're determining this, and Chris, you're obviously involved as well, when you're determining this application to come in for the house, the floor plan, we're about to go over the elevation. I mean, you really don't, I guess it was your opinion here or the decision, you had to pick something to file the application with the staff, is that, whether or not the sliver of property, parcel 2 is in Gulfstream, the homeowner owns both, right? Okay, we're going with that regardless if you have to do any corrective issues later. And then the staff is like, okay, well, do we include it or don't we? It's the variance request to get the application done and with the house that they're proposing. And that's really how the decision was made.
That's right. So we were only looking as to parcel 1 to determine setbacks and floor area ratio and things like that.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
So just real quick to clarify the 3 different variance requests. The first is the rear setback for the principal structure, which is the home, which is 30 feet under the code. Now, the mayor, I guess, has found persuasive the argument that this is perhaps an interior lot. Staff had counseled the ARPB that because it was originally platted as a waterfront lot, that staff had applied the waterfront setback, which is 30 feet for the principal structure, as opposed to 20. So if you find that it's more, that the 20-foot setback is appropriate given these circumstances, the variance requested would be irrelevant because they meet the 20-foot setback because they're seeking a 21-foot setback. So that's the first issue that we have with the variance. The second one is the floor area ratio. They're seeking to increase it by 324 square feet. So I think that's the number I keep on wanting to call Mr. Smith, Chairman Smith, but it's Commissioner Smith was looking for. So that's the number that they're increasing it over what would be permitted if they were just looking at parcel 1. And then the third issue is the minor accessory setback. Again, there's some discrepancy. The plan indicates that it's 10 square feet. Mr. Bernardo indicates that that is under the code. I'm not familiar with a 10-foot rear setback for pools. A pool is a minor accessory structure. Even if you use rear interior, it would be a minimum of 15 feet. So they would not be actually conforming to what they would be entitled to. Had you be considering both properties, they would be seeking for an extra 5 feet in addition to what anyone else would be getting. Now, I'm sure that they could modify that somehow fairly easily, but that's the third variance. It's as to the pool, which is a minor accessory.
If I may add, I believe there's an exception in the code for lots less than 13,000 square feet. And for lots less than 13,000 square feet, the pool setback is 10 feet by code, not 15 or 20 under that exception.
If I remember correctly, section 7075E1.
I mean, while they're looking it up, it's a waterfront lot. I mean, so when you look back on the project, whatever's done here, something will ultimately be done, built. You're going to have, you look at the adjacent property owners to the west, which are in Gulfstream. We do deal with issues, although they're tentatively commercial related, with homeowners and businesses and property owners in bordering towns. It works both ways sometimes. So it's the homeowner, the resident bought it with lots of waterfront.
Right.
Probably one of the primary reasons you bought it.
Yes.
There's nothing precluding you from using the water, the Delray Basin there. So, I mean, it's a waterfront lot. So I guess the question is, as we get into the nitty gritty here on this is, the pool thing I think can be remedied. Is basically, again, the setback of the house and, what we're using for the floor area ratio. I mean, it's interesting because your property line goes above the sea. And I don't know how you're going to handle the seawall. That thing needs to be redone. I mean, I assume you can redo it in place. I mean, do you have I'm leading down the road, you got to include this property somehow. I guess the variance is the right way to do it. I'm not so sure today, and then obviously we deal with a lot of seawalls and docks. Is our dock permit here going through Gulfstream?
Yeah,
There is one?
that's the next.
Because I think that's a
Yeah.
Delray permit.
Well, we would try that. Delray says it's not their city. So I would think that leads us to one of the key reasons why something has to be done with the parcel.
Who's the taxing authority on that property?
Let me just clarify this for you, Mayor. So the taxing authority is Delray, but I did speak consistent with what the attorney's saying with one of the city attorneys in Delray who indicated they did not annex it. So it is kind of this missing parcel that is unincorporated essentially, but looking at the tax rolls, Mr. Pahota is paying taxes to the city of Delray.
Delray's been collecting taxes on this property since 1950.
As far as we know, that's correct. So I think there's a number of issues that aren't completely relevant today, but it should be considered. And I think Mr. Stanley addressed those properly. They just go on and on. The seawall, who do we go through for the seawall, the dock? So this all relates to a single, in our opinion, the logical and correct method to resolve the issue would be to have this property annexed. And back to Commissioner Stanley's point, the eventual result, if you consider Mr. Mayor's affinity to the 20-foot setback from interior, well, once it's annexed, it does legally then become a waterfront lot, and you still comply because then it's 30 feet. So either way, we would comply in that scenario. And I agree. It's waterfront. That's why Mr. Pahota bought it. But what we're talking about is, we're talking about the fine line between the legalities of this lot calculations and the practical and effectual use. And
I'm trying to come up with a way to help you out somewhat.
Understood. And I think that I would address that if we did go ahead and annex this land, it would resolve itself, because then we would be within the 30-foot setback. And the FAR and the pool setback, it would all fall into place upon the annex. And I think that's very relevant to address. I mean, obviously, we can't promise you that that's going to happen.
Right,
It's up to
but
the
it's not
town.
annexed.
But yeah,
So
it's not there.
it's
but
either premature
Well,
or it has to be considered as a variance.
that's correct.
And that's why you're here.
That's correct.
And there shouldn't be anything precluding you from fixing a seawall when it's actually on your own property.
Yeah, the issue
It's
is
rarely done, it's usually not. Yeah.
Yeah, the issue.
Almost no one ever does it. It's out into the waterway, a little bit abutting the property line. It's an exception on your survey, so I can't see that.
So,
Yeah, anyway.
okay. Let's move on then to the application for the home itself and the architectural style.
Oh,
Okay,
no, this, basically, I went, we want to walk around the area where the house is being located, and we snap a couple of pictures of, the different styles of architecture that we have in the area. Very interesting. Love the fact that, it's a little bit more free as far as the architectural style. And we use the, Anglo-Caribbean inspiration to do this house for Mr. Devotas. Not going into the FARs and, rear setbacks. We took into consideration all our side setbacks, front setbacks. We designed a house that, if you can see from the elevations and the renderings, all the way at we set back the front of the house and the rear of the house to create this, nice transition from the first floor to the second floor of the building to comply with all the, volumes and proportions that, the design guidelines, recommend. If you have any questions or if you want.
Between the front entry and the garage, there appears to be a large vertical portion of the home that goes from the first floor to the second floor without any setback. Is that accurate?
Sort of jumps out at us right when you see we've had some issues with that in the past.
Between the garage and the entrance? Yeah, that's the stair
the
tower.
two-story stair, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a tower. That's a better way
It's
to
the
describe it.
tower.
Almost looks like an elevator shaft with windows. I mean, so it just kind of jumps out at us, because we've got a lot of, I know you've talked with staff about these things, is, the two-story entry features are one major thing that we look at. I don't know if I'm necessarily that thrilled with the two-story entry feature over the door.
Yeah, that's it.
And definitely
It's basically a balcony.
yeah, I mean, like
covering.
the size of the house, again, and the improvements to the neighborhood, we get all that. I think we covered that today, but what is that, like an 18-foot window over the
It's
stairway?
3 foot window on the bottom, and then you have another segment of 3 and 6 feet.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, something would have to be done with that. I mean, again, as soon as I opened the page, my eye went right to it, because we've had a lot of, issues within the town, even from residents concerning those features, what it looks from the street. And then I realize you're most likely, you're compliant with the two-story entry feature. I don't think it's a tremendous expense, but I'm just wondering, I'm not going to design your house for you, but I'm just wondering if something can be, I mean, you got a little, it's minimal, what I call minimalist Anglo Bermuda. And, again, the minimalist Anglo Bermuda has has created a great amount of flack for the commission in the last 6 to 12 months. So sorry to say, it's nothing that you did. It's nothing that we did. It's just something that's happened. But I'm just looking, like I said, it's a beautiful home. I would love to live there. We know all that. We've covered all the issues with the lot so far in the basin. But I was just the long entry window, and then I just don't know about that balcony. I don't, maybe it needs a different railing, or the picture is not doing it justice, but that would be my, the mayor made just kind of my 2 comments on the front facade.
Yeah, those are the 2 renderings of the front of the house.
I think you're missing some critical Anglo-Caribbean elements. The Caribbean, there are no shutters here. Shutters are a essential element of Caribbean
We
architecture.
have, on the front, we have the Bermuda shutters. Those are the, on the front of the.
Are you going to give them some color, or are they going to be the same color as the walls?
They used to keep the house monochromatic with the darker roof. And we have, the landscape is basically the one that is adding the color to the design.
I don't see
the shutters on that front. You called it like a bonus room or something. Are there shutters on either side of that window? The very front?
Not on the first floor. The shutters are on the second floor, the small windows.
Well, just those small ones, but that's the other element of Caribbean, is smaller windows separated by horizontal mullions. With shutters. That is an essential element of Caribbean. There's no Palladian balance, which would be Anglo. So I don't see that application. The windows are much larger than would be considered for Anglo-Caribbean. So, but the biggest point is the one that Mr. Stanley focused on. Those are my comments.
I have no other comments.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's move on then to yes, sir.
Quick question. This particular house, for example, has also the 2-story volumes on the front and all in one straight, and they put this mansard roof. Is that something that you're keen to have as a solution for those 2-story volumes?
Well, you have some and you have some mullions, but they're just the vertical mullions separating large windows.
I'm talking about the stair tower. That's an issue, having that 2-story stair tower. And this one has, a volume on the left and a volume on the right.
That's a neighbor's.
This is one of the neighbor's property.
The neighbor property.
I'm bringing that as an example because it has that mansard roof. Basically, the wall is still this 2-story wall, and they put this, 2-foot mansard roof.
Yeah, I mean, it's breaking up the house. Yeah, so you've got a distinct 2 levels.
That 2-story?
Yes, we just had that in a home within, 300 yards of this, where we had to break up a 2-story facing wall with some sort of an architectural element.
Okay, so it's an alternative to the house.
Correct.
Strip towers, they tend to be, vertical walls.
Right.
You cannot set back like what we did with the entry or the outer entrance on.
In that example, really, there's quite a nice break there between the first and second floor with that roof.
That mansard roof.
Correct.
Okay.
And they've got some additional outdoor sills, not that, you might need to do that, but there's a couple additional elements on that, including with the windows. And then, the other thing, just, I'm sure the staff probably told you, and this is not proposed here, but I'm just going to make the comment, is when you, I hate to use it, when you have more of a, I would say a slightly minimalist, which is about the change facade, is that the, make sure that obviously that your window color, your mutton color or frames are not too dark. I'll just leave it at that. I think you have white proposed or off-white. I don't think that's going to change. Don't change it. And
no,
I don't want there.
Yeah, so
The
I understand. Yeah.
front door is all glass.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's another element that's not found in Caribbean architecture. It's wood, like the photo you just showed us. There's some window, but not all window. This is contemporary design. That's what this really is. Minimalist, perhaps, is a nice way of framing it.
We're not set on like an all glass door, if that's important. I mean, it's really,
Yeah, it is. That's why we're making all these comments now.
We
so that when you come back,
We're happy to-
right. We're trying to give you guidance so that this doesn't continue meeting after meeting, okay?
Definitely.
All right. Any comments from the public? If not, let's move on to
So
the application.
I'm just gonna, well, what do we think we're doing here? We have changes. And you've got the ARPB. I don't think that we can approve the application as presented. I think we're really close. I think Mr. Bernardo's done a heck of a lot of work with the staff. We've got a few, I think, facade changes that are very important that we've been getting feedback on continually from the residents in town, both sides. So, I mean, what's the best option here for the applicant? I mean, we realize we don't want to delay them another 90 days, but the application is going to have to be pulled and resubmitted. And I think we've got to come to, the mayor's talking about the cart before the horse here procedurally. Not much we can do about it, but it's a waterfront lot. I mean, other than the variance, we may have to come up with another solution that lets them continue through the permitting process once the final plan is approved. And something will get approved. I mean, don't think that it won't. Where they can probably continue through the process while this site plan is cleaned up a little bit as far as the water part. It's a waterfront lot. I think the debate's kind of ended there. The question is how do we handle it with regard to the FAR and then these elements here. I think the question's answered. If it's in process to be cleaned up as far as, it's in the town of Gulfstream, it's now a legal waterfront lot with the unity of title, I think a lot of these variance issues sort of fall away. And if it's a foot here or a foot there, I think we can deal with that.
It's up to the applicant.
Yeah.
You want us to rule on this, or do you want to pull it?
You tell me how you're gonna rule first.
Well, you can.
I'm not very subtle.
You can kind of get the tone, yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I think there's a few other elements that the staff would recommend to the applicant to make it more Anglo-Caribbean. And I'm not sure that perhaps maybe postponing it to a date certain, maybe 1 month, that we can sit down with them and talk about some of these elements. You've already talked about a few. I mean, the bands are needed and necessary.
The facade changes, but let's just talk about, so we got two things. So one, the facade and the house application for what's going to be built, the elevation. So if we're going to make some major changes to the facade that hopefully aren't too expensive for the applicant, and that's going to be required to go back to ARPB, or is it not?
And it'd be up to the commission. Of course, we do run into the issue that we have maybe 20 days to the next ARPB meeting, and then we don't meet in August. So if you return it to the ARPB, that doesn't give them a lot of time.
We don't necessarily, as long as you've got, the staff has a pretty concrete list of what's going to happen. And I don't know, again, scheduling with the architect and the owner and whatnot, it's tough this time of year, but I don't think it needs to go back.
If you defer as opposed to withdraw,
Yeah.
it can come back to the commission.
Yeah, then my second question is, defer it. You come back with changes, we're the ultimate governing body that would approve the final site plan. It does need to go back down because the ARPB may have something different than what ultimately happens here. We've looked at it now, we've had our discussion. And then the second thing, so on the what I call when I deal with these things, the water parcel, as I put on my surveys and what. So the water parcel, or parcel 2, do we still think if we get a little more color on this, as far as that procedurally, that it, I think we're caught in a little bit of a gap here. So we're going to approve a house. It's going to go through permitting. It's an expensive house. I don't care what the square footage is. I know it's expensive. And then we don't want it, but then we've got all this site work, legal work and with the staff and whatnot, and Mr. Bernardo, that's got to be done while the thing's going through permitting. That's just the thing I'm grappling with. It's nothing that the owner did, and it's nothing that we did.
I think one of the main questions is the dock and seawall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
I mean, we're not even.
as it is
we're
right
not even
now, it's
going
not
that
in the
direction.
town of.
It's not in the town of
Gulf
Gulfstream.
Yeah.
We cannot consider it as part of our zoning, our architectural design, our elements of neighborhood districting. It's not
Right.
in our town.
Yeah.
Now, if it becomes part of our town, then that's different.
I think what Commissioner Stanley is suggesting is that we explore the annexation issue in the interim. Is that what you're?
I mean, yeah, normally what we would have to do, and I know with all the other things going on in the world, this is not what the owner wants to hear, but normally what we would do, I think we've decided what needs to be done to get you what you want. And plus, what do we always look at too, whether you're going to be here or not? What are you supposed to prove to somebody else who may buy it in the future, right? Whether it's town getting a permit on this to renovate something or the pool later on, or, it's, I just, you're grappling with the fact, I don't know whether this is 6 months, 3 months, how long it would take to get something out of the county. I mean, so I think that the mayor is correct in that if we know it's a waterfront lot, the house has to be designed as such. But, do we go ahead procedurally and you try to build this house based on what's in the town of Gulfstream, knowing that we have certain elements that have to be considered because it is on a basin? Or do you get everything ready, which you're pretty close, other than that we've got to get this house looking a little more like an angled Bermuda structure, and then figure out what the best path is with the town staff to get this parcel 2 in line so we could actually include it as part of the lot, have a unity of title and all the things that, we normally would do. I think you probably had to do this anyway to tee this up. It's a term we use all the time. So, and teeing it up is getting it all the way to the commission level. So I think that was, to support Chris and the applicant, something you had to do. So I think I think deferral is the best bet here till we get a little, best procedural thing here, until we get a little more.
I mean, we try to get to yes with our residents. And I think that by voting on this will not, you'll eventually get to yes, but it's going to take a lot longer. I think you're better off deferring this and sorting some things out, coming back directly to us, not to the ARPB.
I agree. That's but in essence, we're not prejudiced either way. We're just prejudiced. Time is the worst.
I think time is the issue. You all know that depending on permitting in any municipality, it could take a while.
Right.
And, again, I do think one of the things that came up in teeing this up is, I'm telling you, that basin is tricky with regard to docks and seawalls and the adjacent neighbors, both in this town and not in this town. So and that, even though those applications can be submitted separately, we've been through that over the last 2 or 3 years. It's something that needs to be considered as a whole, given your parcel 2 issue. But if you get a timeline and kind of figure out what needs to be done with parcel 2, with the staff, and again, this is what towns do. It's an audit. We've had oddities in the Pelican Landing area before, and we know what to do. And I think we've got sufficient guidance on the front facade. So it's helpful.
In a purely informal discussion on it, I would say that technically it wouldn't appear that there would be much of an objection to an annexation from a practical point. I mean, I would assume, when I haven't gone to the county yet, I know the city of Delray Beach, they said, come over, sign whatever, they don't want anything to do with it until they realize they've been collecting taxes on it. I mean, that's another issue. But I would assume that when I go to the county, they're not going to know, no one's going to know anything about this. That's the assumption. In fact, even the state, I would assume no one knows about it. So I think it's more of an issue of procedure, which we have to work with the town attorney on, of an annexation. And I don't know if that requires a referendum from the town. I believe it might, but that's really, that's the town, that's the primary issue. I think maybe if we defer this and have a game plan on that, that might be the best method to proceed.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe we want to work with you, Mr. Bowe.
And simultaneously, you can work with the staff to make this more similar to the 2 houses that or the one house that you showed as a comparison.
What would be the next what would be the approximate deferral time, assuming that we work with staff? Would we be able to make the next meeting or would that?
It's August the 12th.
August 12th.
And I think the elements that we're talking about to make these more similar can be accomplished.
Sure.
Yeah, but.
Not a total.
But the
redesign.
issues about annexation, you need to, you can update us on that monthly or whatever,
Right.
but that's not, you're not gonna.
You're not gonna get that
there
done
in
by our
30 days.
No, but possibly we would have at least a game plan. for you to
Correct.
consider in your call.
But the shape, size of the house is dependent upon your annexation. I don't know that I would come forward with that before you secured the property in the Gulfstream.
We'd have to put I don't think we've done that before. You'd have to put a pretty major condition on the approval, the site plan approval. And then whenever the condition was met, then it would go. But again, at that point, we don't know. You have to come back. I mean, there's some oddities down there. We've dealt with the intersection of Pelican and Andrews, which is right by your house and things. We get it.
neighbor.
Yeah, we get it.
Okay, but I think everyone's in agreement. Let's just defer. We're not going to rule on this
For the
application.
next.
Okay.
August 12th.
Right. And then you can report back to staff and decide when it comes back up. Okay?
Is everyone clear here on the process to annex? I know I'm not, but I can talk to Chris later, but does everyone know what that is?
No, a private property owner seeking annexation of property in another district. No, we'll defer to staff on that one.
I think that the only thing we do know for certain is that it would have to be, it's not something we can do. It's something the town, we could assist, work with the town, but what we're really talking about is a town annexing from the county. Because we already own the property. Now, what we're talking about is the municipality annexation. I would assume that would go through, vote, referendum.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to defer to staff to advise
Yeah.
you and us, and of course, you need to do your own
There would be
research.
a publication and
Yeah.
numbers
I
of other
believe
things.
there's a shorter process for smaller parcels like this. I don't, but that's what we're learning. That would be the whole resolution.
Okay, good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you for all your time on this.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm sorry, Mayor, before we move on, can I just get a motion to defer to the next
I
meeting?
make a
Yes,
motion
good
to
point.
defer the application.
Second?
Ms. Taylor.
And before you read that,
Vice
Ms.
Mayor
Rita,
Stanley?
just confirm that it is to the, August 12th meeting.
Okay.
Motion as amended, second?
Ms. Taylor.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Morgan?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you, John.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I referred to you as commissioner, saying.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just trying to get y'all where you need to go. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, back to Woodman report on CIP. Rebecca.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Travis, Baxter Woman. I have here with me Jeff Hiscock and Sarah Pranyava-Bakul. We're going to provide you with an update with the core area preliminary design report update. So typically, when we're working on a project of this size, we do a preliminary design report to identify some main design element decisions. It's like a 30% design. And then we proceed into the detail of the project elements from there. So I'll be talking about the roadway improvements, then Jeff will talk some about the drainage, and Sarah about the water main improvements. And then we'll talk about the money and the schedule. Okay, so the roadway improvements, our main goals for the project is to provide consistent pavement widths throughout the neighborhood, the core area, replace damaged and failing pavement, reconstruct the roadways to facilitate the drainage runoff and alleviate the ponding at the edge of pavement, and then address the side road rutting.
Rebecca, will Lakeview and/or Banyan be expanded?
So, yes.
somewhat.
That's actually this next slide. So consistent pavement width. So when we were doing the minor drainage improvement project a couple years ago, we worked with staff to identify like what was the general width of the asphalt pavement for all the roads in the core area that we did for that minor drainage improvement project. So one was Polo Drive, which generally speaking is a 20-foot road width, asphalt road width. So we widened where we needed to widen to bring a consistency to that road width. Not to say there weren't individual properties that had special circumstances that we didn't quite make it 20 foot. The balance of the roads, we widened, the plan is to widen to an 18-foot width, with the exception of Oleander Way and Middle Road east of Polo Drive, which have very narrow right-of-ways. So we're looking at a 14-foot. And this is just to have kind of a consistent standardization for the town, just for argument purposes, to have a straight driving lane. Not to say again that individual lots, we might have to deviate from that, and that's kind of what we did on the minor drainage improvement project. The other aspect of the core improvement project is to replace failing pavement. So we had a geotechnical report done, and they identified that there's organics and unsuitable materials under the road section, primarily along Polo Drive and streets west of there. So we're proposing to install under the new pavement a geotextile fabric pavement reinforcement to help the new pavement span some of that unsuitable material, and that will increase the structural capability of the roads for those areas. But arguably our main issue with this project is to facilitate the drainage runoff and alleviate rutting alongside the roads. So for the core area, we pretty much don't have any area for swales, maybe a little bit along C Road, the west end of C Road. The runoff right now collects at the edge of pavement, as you can see in that picture. We have insufficient longitudinal slope along the streets to move the water. So once it runs off from the crown of the pavement to the edge of the pavement, it doesn't have a way to go along the road. There's few drainage inlets to take the drainage away, and then we have subsequent pavement failure, primarily at the edge of pavement. So start with the swale section. As I mentioned, we really don't have an opportunity for that, but that's kind of the least cost option. So in the Place Austerlitz, which is not part of this project, but it's a good demonstration, they have swales. You can see the grass area. They have the storm inlets in the grass area, so the water runs off the road, gets into the swale, goes into the inlets, and you have minimal pavement damage and failure along the edges there. So unfortunately, that option's a little bit off the table for the core area. We just don't have area for swales, to develop swales. So we're looking at some alternate edge treatment options for the roads. So it's the bottom left little diagram, that's a swale area. Again, we're not going to be able to do that. The top left is type F curb and gutter as another option for adjacent to the roads. That's a curb that raises up from the edge of pavement. It's elevated. It's a mountable curb. And then the valley gutter is the one on the right side. So that's a concrete gutter that runs along both edges of the road. And that's what we're proposing for the core area. So again, for two-way roads, which is pretty much everywhere but Oleander and Middle east of Polo, we're going to have 2 asphalt drive lanes, valley gutter on both sides of the road, drainage inlets in that valley gutter to take the take the runoff away, and then regrade the roadways longitudinally so we can get the runoff to go from the crown of the road to the valley gutter, and then along the valley gutter into the drainage inlets. So here's just a visual example of valley gutter on both sides of the road. The top photo, sorry, I can't, a little bit small, but this is Ocean Drive and Jupiter Inlet Colony on the top. That's before they put the valley gutter along the edge of the road section. And you can see on the right side of the road that people, it's kind of shell rock, people are parking over on the side there. And then on the bottom, they've done the installation with the valley gutter on both sides. Here's another example over in the town of Palm Beach, Sanford Avenue with the valley gutter on both sides. This kind of shows you a little bit where the town of Gulfstream has a similar situation where you might have a ficus hedge screen right up to the edge of the road. And, you know, that kind of situation and installation where we would see similar to Gulfstream is shown in this picture. We'll just talk about type F curb and gutter. Again, this is just another option. We're not really considering this since I know the town has not embraced raised curb, except in maybe, I think you've got some on Lakeview and Polo where you're trying to protect the curb return so people aren't cutting the curb. So this is just an option. We're not really proposing this for this project. And then on the one-way streets, we'll call them one-way, but the narrower right-of-ways, again, asphalt drive lane. Then we're considering inverted crown. So instead of the center of the road being higher, in this case, the crown of the road is in the middle. It's not the crown, it's inverted crown. So then the drainage runs to the middle of the road. And then, so on the left side, there's an example. I think these are both in Palm Beach. The left side, that's an inverted crown with the drainage inlet in the middle. There's no valley gutter on this example, but we could do it with valley gutter, which we would recommend. Valley gutter down the middle, curb inlet in the middle of the road to take the drainage away. This again would only be for the narrower road section of Oleander and Middle Road. So now I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk a little bit more about the drainage improvements.
Thank you. Our effort really has kind of been done recently. The preliminary engineering was done with 2 recent studies that we did, and I presented those to you. I want to just kind of recap that a little bit and then tell you where we are, because it took more coordination and we're still kind of in that coordination. The overall for drainage, what we're looking at is, of course, decreasing the flooding. We want to improve water quality wherever we can. Installation of inline check valves. This was a king tide resiliency study that we had done, and the town has already moved on that and installed inline check valves on all the existing outfalls. Now, there's going to be a couple more that would come with this CIP project, and I know that there's one issue, at least maybe 2 of the new ones that have been installed that we'll be taking a look at and see if we can make some corrections on. And then there's the extension of stormwater inlets and infrastructure in order to take care of the nuisance ponding areas. These are areas like Rebecca was talking about. We're going to be redesigning this road so that we can get some longitudinal pitch and try to get water where it needs to go, where these inlets are. And there may be some areas, and there will probably be some areas where we can't get it to an inlet. We're going to have to add an inlet. We're going to have to add some pipes and infrastructure, and then connect that to one of your outfalls. So, and that's one of the things we had just bounced with. That's all the pictures are gone. There was, we had, in our report, we had identified where all the ponding areas were. We took pictures at every location. There were probably about, I think, 20 so locations where ponding just occurred. And what we're going to do when we go through this detailed design, we're going to make sure that we're picking up all of those areas. And make sure we don't have this issue, I mean, to the best of our ability, of picking up any kind of ponded water. Oh, there's the pictures. Anyway, we took, several pictures throughout the town, throughout the core area, so we know where all the problems are in that regard. So the evaluation, overall evaluation of the core area included a total watershed study that included the Middle Club Golf Course. The whole watershed that we looked at is 158 acres. We also looked at Old School and Polo Road Basin, which is really where most of the problems are occurring for flooding. And also we included Little Club because there is a drainage connection to Little Club, and there was a possibility of maybe some kind of exchange of flows that could improve the project for drainage, for flooding. One of the things that we found, this was using the county's latest LIDAR data, is that the area that drains into the core area basin, where the problems are, is much bigger than what we had thought. There's actually quite a large area along A1A that drains down from the north to the south and then drains to the west and gets into that area. So that kind of explains some of the flooding there. It happens to be the low area as well. So that was something that we wanted to consider with any of the alternatives that we looked at. And we looked at 4 modeling scenarios. We wanted to add another pump, see what that could do. An additional lake within the golf course, perhaps that could help in some way. Enlarging an outfall pipe, and also diverting water from A1A into the Club. After looking at all of those alternatives, we found that the only one that really helped the core basin area was the third option of enlarging one of the outfall pipes. There's an existing pipe right where that problem exists now. If we enlarge that from a 24-inch to a 48-inch, it has a dramatic effect. The colors here, we're looking at existing versus proposed after we install that new outfall pipe. The colors in red and orange, and that indicates flooding depths. You can see that it comes down to a minimal amount after we install that new pipe. So our improvements include replacing that 24-inch pipe with the 48. We have several other improvements along with that. We've got to put in an inline check valve with that new pipe.
Excuse me, Jeff, where is that? Where is the pipe?
Oh, sorry, this is
Run down the Old School.
it's the red bottom.
That line runs in between.
Oh, here it is. Yep, there's the, yeah, it's right here. I don't know if you can see in the mouse.
Down, hold up.
Yes.
Right.
South on.
Correct. We also recommending a connection, this was after talking with Anthony as well, up along Old School, that other red pipe, that would be a new pipe connection. There will be others, of course, as we talked about, trying to pick up the nuisance flooding that will be in the town. But these are what came out of the drainage evaluation for this specific area.
How does the pipe south on Polo help with the drainage north on Polo at Old School?
The pipe south on Polo, the southern, the 48-inch?
Yes, exactly.
It helps the entire basin because it's all interconnected. It's from what was in the previous, we showed that whole area up to the intersection.
Do the pumps pump up through that pipe? Would the 2 pumps pump up through that pipe, or is that pump out south?
The pump, there's a green line here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we want to go through this like every 6 months. Memory's not good.
Substation's here.
Okay. Yeah.
The substation is really not sized to handle all that flow that's coming.
Yeah.
And the pump has this green line. There's a green line that goes to the west, and then it goes south, and that goes into the water.
Yep.
That's the pressure pipe that it pumps into
right.
and discharges out that way. It's just not enough to handle that kind of a storm. We were just looking at a 3-year storm. It's a high intensity storm, but it needs a lot more flow. through the existing pipes and through the pump station.
So the new outfall to the south would, that's gonna take a lot of the water off of those pumps
Yes.
coming down, especially when we have the,
I see the pumps being used primarily, I mean, they'll be used. Winter heating.
Yeah.
But I see them primarily when we have some king tide events or just some, even high tide. And at the same time, because the gravity system's not going to work very well under those conditions. And we're going to need that extra, pumpage just to get it out. So they'll work together. Work together that way. So what happens with this scenario is we increase the discharge, which makes sense because bigger pipe, we need to get the water out quicker in order to reduce the flooding. And the issue we have with that is South Florida Water Management District does not really allow that. They have pre versus post criteria. They don't normally allow you to increase discharge beyond the existing discharge rate. So we had a meeting with the district. They told us about a new rule that they have called the retrofitting. And they allow some increase in discharge in exchange for some of our goals. So we were working off of that. We talked about the issues of water quality out here. This is a little difficult to get swales and French drains, while running the water table. And they suggested, what about your other option of doing a lake at the golf course? That could provide some water quality. So that's kind of where we were proceeding based on that recommendation from the district. And we've been coordinating with the golf course. We have a suggestion that's shown here, this blue area, that second lake from north coming down. We thought we could expand that lake out, get that lake big enough to meet the district's criteria for lake sizes. And after the golf course, they have some concerns about doing that. They believe that the district will allow us to have a small lakes and just increase some of the other lakes in the golf course and not necessarily meet the national criteria. And they have engineering believe that too. So we met with the district for a second time, trying to get some kind of okay on that. They were completely uncommitted. We're going to have to keep working on it to get an answer of whether that's going to be acceptable or not. At the meeting, they also told us that retrofit rule would not apply to us because they didn't realize there was a pump station here. I think they did because we told them, but I don't think they understood the rule very well at the time. It's a new rule. They're saying we can't use the retrofit. So we talked to them about some other possibilities, another approach. And I brought up the pre versus post to them again. And I asked them, how far back can we go when we look at pre? Can we go back before anything is built? And they said yes. So I'm currently analyzing that. It's a whole separate modeling that has to be done with complete different parameters that go back to circa 1900. And I'm modeling that to see what the discharge is back then. And then we can compare that instead of what's currently discharging. Because I believe that there's restrictions because of the development. They normally believe that that increases discharge. Increases it because there's impervious. But in this case, I believe that it's decreased because homes have all put up the roads. All you have is old, small pipes to let it out. You can just shoot them down. So that's the analysis we're performing now. I think that's going to come out to show that there's no discharge back before development. I think they're willing to look at that. They said, send us the calculations. You don't have to send in an application. Just we'll take a look at it whenever you have. So
how do the basins weren't there in 1900. So how do those affect the discharge?
I took a look at the information that we have, which is completely different based on what has been done. Of course, dredged out the canals, popped it on the land, to the houses. I wiped all of that out. Okay. looking at, best guess, looking at some of the contours that were there that were not changed, and then just extrapolating those. So there are still basins, there are areas that they went up and down, so I was able to draw basins just for that. About the model using various overland flow and wide shallow chain discharge. And that's the model analysis I would share with them. And if they get okay, then that takes care of the discharge problem. We still do want water quality though, so we still need to do something with the lakes, or what I would like to do is come up with a backup plan in case that becomes a problem. We want to look at some areas where we possibly could build some French drain. Show the district that we're doing everything we can. There's actually some areas where we might be able to get some split. It's not a lot. We have the Gulf Stream Road possibility next to the golf course. There's already a very shallow swale there. We could make a better swale. So we can look at everything we can possibly do and get into the detailed design. And that to me is the backup plan for if this doesn't work in the golf course. But it may end up being that maybe it's better to do this on backwards instead of the golf course. So that's still kind of up in there. And as soon as we get some more information, we can report that to you.
Great. And I know we've talked before, just remember all of the town's property that we have in this area here for exfiltration.
Right.
Systems. I don't know if that would help mitigate, but you don't have to ask us for permission.
Yeah, they're looking look at it as a mitigation, but they don't necessarily have to have the water quality where the problems are, which is good. We can just add water quality somewhere else. That's why they're willing to accept the golf course having a bigger lake. It's better water quality. It's better water quality for them. But still overall, to net improvement. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'm going to be going back into the district probably within a couple of weeks with the model results. And I want to also pin them down on the night.
We really appreciate the diligence you're showing and the time you're putting into this. It's very important to us, as you know. It's critical to the CIP.
And it can be very convoluted working with the district. Town's been with me in the meetings. We also met, I will mention, we met with the homeowner. What's that lot number on Polo? It's right on
the corner of that old school.
Yeah. With a pipe.
Actually, not.
Yes.
It's right.
It's the second
Right
house.
next to where the new pipe is going. We met with them because of the issue with the king tide coming up in between houses there. They were the ones identified by the having the low elevation. That homeowner talked to us about the seawall that they're going to be doing. They're going to be replacing the seawall. We talked to them about how that's exactly going to be constructed, whether that would take care of the problem. I don't want water getting around it coming through. And it sounds like that's going to completely take care of the problem. Mainly also because the neighbor's going to do the same thing. And there's also, that's where the pipe is going to go actually, but the easement is in the neighbor's property. And the seawall designers were there at the meeting, and they indicated they'd be willing to design the seawall so that it has a big enough opening. So that's another element of coordination that we're doing with them.
Great. And any other questions? Mr. Dunham?
No, is Jockey gonna?
Jockey's gonna.
We're still going.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, so another aspect of the project is the potable water distribution system that we will replace in the core area. The reasoning for this is replacing aging asbestos cement piping that you have, which is over 50 years old. Asbestos cement piping is very brittle, and I believe another gentleman earlier mentioned how the costs for the town have gone up because of the maintenance on this piping. So That's one of the main key reasons why we're replacing these pipes.
Right.
We're also going to increase some of the pipe diameters in strategic areas to provide improved fire flow. We are going to provide additional fire hydrants throughout the core area to meet the county's fire requirements for 50 feet between fire hydrants. And then we are also going to relocate water meters from the alleyways between Polo Drive and Gulfstream Road to the front of the homes to make access easier for operation and maintenance.
And we're going to add valves in the streets so that we can further.
As part of it, we'll include additional control valves, so it's easier for operation and maintenance to isolate streets when an issue does arise. Okay, so we have two methods of construction that we're proposing for this project. One being the traditional installation method, which is open cut trench installation. You probably saw this during the construction for the A1A water main improvement project about a year or so ago. They'll use heavy equipment, excavators to excavate a trench. The pipe gets installed section by section, they backfill, and we move on. So this type of construction will be done for the installation of fittings, fire hydrants, water services, and also for areas where we're installing new water mains where there's not an existing water main that we'll be using as a host pipe. Now, host pipe is for our second installation method, which is pipe bursting. So with pipe bursting, what we do is we'll use the existing asbestos cement pipe and we'll pull in a brand new pipe within the same existing pipe. So the benefits of doing this in this manner is that you will put the pipe in the exact same location without having additional piping in your right of way. You're minimizing your impacts to the surface. So all your improvements that you have right now, such as landscaping, decorations, whatever, within the right of ways will not be impacted because you're pulling the pipe through the existing pipe and not damaging by excavating it during an open trench installation. What we'll also do by doing this is you will avoid your impacts to your brand new underground facilities, all your new utilities that you've buried underground. By doing it this way, you're guaranteed where that pipe is going to go. So you're not going to have that same concern as if you were doing an open cut trench and your utilities. Okay. And also, yeah, so those are the key reasons for doing the pipe bursting method.
Since that pipe's going to be a little smaller, does it restrict water flows somewhat?
No, you can actually increase the size as well.
What does it burst the old pipe?
It explodes it, exactly. It'll explode the pipe. You can do up to a size above or 2 sizes above, depending on your soils and your conditions. But since we're rebuilding the roadways here, we don't have the concern, because usually there's a concern with the roadways heaving when you're yanking the pipes through. But these are, for the most part, they're going to be the same size pipes. Where we're increasing the pipe diameters are at the ends of your dead end roads, where we're adding fire hydrants for flushing reasons.
An environmental issue.
What's that?
Environmental issue?
Environmental, as long as the asbestos doesn't become airborne, yes, by pipe bursting it, you're minimizing the exposure to the airborne asbestos, and it prevents it from becoming viable.
It remains in the soil?
It does. It remains underground. Correct.
And it's not really exploded.
It bursts.
It
bursts.
As the thing falls through it.
It breaks down. Right. There's no explosions
So
here.
the residents' houses are not going to shake.
Yes. All right. So pipe materials here. So we're replacing the asbestos pipe material with PVC C900 bell and spigot. This is your typical water main piping that's used throughout. It's a commonly used product. It's easily operated on by operation and maintenance. And then it's also resistant to corrosion in these corrosive coastal environments. Okay. And then for the pipe bursting operations, we'll use PVC C900 fusible pipe. So you'll have pipe that's laid out along the edge of the road. They'll fuse it together so it's one homogeneous pipe, and they'll pull it through during construction. Okay, so this figure here shows our preliminary layout for the construction of the project. I know it might be a little bit difficult to see. It's pretty far, but we've identified areas where we will do the open trench installation, and then we've also identified areas where we'll do the pipe bursting installation. As well, we've also identified locations of future fire hydrants. Again, this is preliminary in nature, so depending on the design of the stormwater and where we end up putting inlets and whatnot, it may be altered as we move further on. Okay, so for the water service relocations along Polo and Gulfstream, this is a depiction of phase 1, where we'll install the water main along Polo Drive first. So once that water main's installed, we can relocate the water service for those homes along Polo to the front of the home. And then during phase 2, again, once the water main's installed along Gulfstream Drive, we'll relocate the water services over for those homes on Gulfstream, and then we'll abandon in place and grout the existing water main that's in the alleyway.
So just to remind you of the phasing, we're designing the project completely for all the areas shown in the red and the green there, and then we're constructing them in phases. The west side in the pink is first, and then the green is phase 2. That's to kind of keep the construction contained so that they're not working in the entirety of the neighborhood at one time. But the contractor will work on the west side first and then move to the east. And we gave you the construction costs, preliminary construction costs broken down in phases, but I'll just go to this slide, which is showing the combined cost estimates for phase 1 and 2. So we've divided it into general conditions, roadway improvements, stormwater improvements, potable water distribution improvements, and we're looking at about $8.5 million for the whole project. We're putting a 30% contingency on top of that right now because of materials availability has really become a problem recently. For a while it was electronics, control panels, that type of stuff. Now it's moved into construction, concrete materials, rock, and it's just a long lead time, and hence typically then the price goes up. And then speaking of price, of course, we all know what's going on with inflation. Now we're looking at construction a year out from now. So hopefully that contingency is generous and inflation will come down, the availability of materials will kind of rectify itself. So we're hoping that typically we put a 20% contingency on stuff, but we've got it 30 right now. And then the utility relocation, that's an allowance. That's kind of, if AT&T's as-builds that they give us aren't really what they thought, where they put it, we have to do some kind of maneuvering to fix, make sure we don't have a conflict of some sort. Got the money in there for that. If it's not used, we don't pay it to the contractor. So we're looking at total with the contingency and the allowance of 11.1. I think that looks like it's cut off a little bit. So that's a generous cost estimate opinion at a preliminary level. We certainly hope to fine tune that and have the costs come down when we get into the finer points of the design. And then we are on schedule. So right now we're in the design and permitting, bidding and award. It's looking at early summer of '23, and then construction starting on phase 1 in July. So a year from now, construction start on phase 1. So that's all we had.
Very good. Any questions? Again, thank you. Very thorough report.
So the preliminary design report's available. We provided that to the town. So if anybody
Great.
needs to look.
Yeah,
from Greg.
okay.
Bob?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask, when you do the gutter
Mhm.
on the road, does that take away from the quote unquote drivable area?
So when I was talking about the standard consistent road width, so let's talk Polo Drive, where we've set it at 20 feet.
Yeah.
So the gutter would be part of that 20. So we're not looking to do a 20-foot asphalt lanes and then gutter on top of that. We're trying to keep it all in that 20 feet or the 18 or the 14 for the one-way.
Okay, so that's
Mhm.
in my.
Right, so it's not going to make that
No,
much
it's a good
difference.
question because
Good question.
from the beginning, when we were doing the minor drainage improvement project, we were widening the roads in some locations, but there were, Anthony and Greg and Trey, along with us, we worked on, okay, this person absolutely did not want to lose a landscape area, so we worked with each and
Yeah,
every property owner
right.
and.
We
so
took it
yes,
block by block,
we
basically.
did, and we're not proposing to just plow through and run the new street.
So the question I had, sort of because of not any engineering at all, is if you did a gutter and you did the crown in such a way that the water still gets to run to the side, and you put in the curb, will that work? So you, instead of having a gutter,
Okay,
I said the wrong thing, I meant a curb. So if you do the crown
so a vertical curb instead of a gutter.
instead of a gutter, so that the water still could flow where you want it to flow. Now granted, it's gonna be broken up for everybody's driveway, but I mean, would that work? Is that feasible? Does that make any sense?
So
And that way you don't lose any of the drivable area in the road?
So the type F gutter has a curb that's raised,
Yep.
and then a 1-foot gutter that's level with the asphalt, and that's considered drivable area, that gutter. With the valley gutter, it's a 2-foot width, and that whole surface is considered drivable. So actually, the valley gutter has more drivable surface than the raised curb. And the problem with some of the raised curb too is that we're still going to be challenged to put a longitudinal slope on all the roads because there's just not a lot of elevation difference in some areas. So with a raised curb, now you've trapped that runoff against the curb. Whereas valley gutter, you can eventually overtop the side of the curb and go off into the grass.
I just thinking because everything's so narrow anyway,
Yeah.
anything you can do to maximize the drivable area. And of course, if you're saying the gutter, you can drive on it, then
Mhm.
it's okay.
And it's a balancing act between, you could pave a 30-foot and you're still not going to have people staying on the road like they're supposed to, So we're trying to balance like the feel of the community road widths without having like the Audubon super paved over. So, and I'm sure the mayor has opinions on how, and all of you have on the look of the roads. And
There's some
so,
aesthetic
yeah, just the
considerations.
aesthetic of it, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a lot more to cover, so I think we're going to take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back.
Gonna get out of here by noon? Maybe not.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. The call, national call. Yeah, I gotta go see what's going on. What else you gotta cover? Anything we're staying for?
Budget.
Budget. Did they address the thing with the
Oh, yeah.
the old school and the lake and all that? Is that part of it? Yeah, it was part of this. Hi, guys.
Okay, good to
Thanks.
see you.
Thought,
Good job.
I thought you guys would enjoy that variance item, so we put you behind them. No, I didn't expect it to be that long.
We need a job or hire.
All right, see you guys. Nah, thanks.
So did they decide that they're gonna let you do that?
What's that? Oh, no, we haven't settled that yet.
And so that's why part of this thing is whether to make one bigger or three
Yeah.
of them bigger. or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Well, he's smart, so he hopes he is, he'll be fine. He doesn't fucking read it.
Okay, 11:35, let's recommence the meeting. Town manager undergrounding report.
Yes, sir. Okay. As Mr. Ganger noted that I would be talking about this later. I can tell you right now, I mean, you've seen trucks coming by here. Some of them had poles on it. We probably have about 18 to 20 poles left on A1A for them to pull out. And so we're probably looking at 2 weeks. So there were 60 to start with, and they're down to about 18. Okay. Yeah, and once again, the people that are doing it are doing a great job. They've not damaged anything, and through this whole process of taking these poles out. So I hope some of you have recognized.
That's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, coming in here to see one day the mayor came in. I said, did you notice anything on C Road? No. And so a lot of people don't even notice the poles
They're gone, but it's nice.
But anyway, it looks great.
That was fantastic.
Town looks so much
Without that. So, I mean, we're almost there. So I'm going to let Trey kind of give a little update on the rezoning request for the auto dealership.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mayor and Commissioners, so the Delray Beach Planning and Zoning meeting happened on June 20th. That was to consider a request to rezone town adjacent parcel along Federal Highway bordering Place au Soleil from general commercial, automotive commercial. I've spoke about this in the last few meetings. I spoke in opposition on behalf of the town. I was joined by one of our ARPB members, Malcolm Murphy, who's a Place au Soleil resident, who spoke on behalf of the Homeowners Association. Unfortunately, that request passed with a 6-1 in favor, going to the City Commission for 2 readings. The first reading will be on July 19th. I continue to work with the Place au Soleil Homeowners Association to obtain some concessions from the dealership. We don't have anything that we've agreed to right now, but I think that some real valuable concessions have been made and offered by the developer. As recently as this week, sort of confirming what I had reached out to them, after the meeting. It's a 3-page letter, and I've sent that to a number of the Place au Soleil homeowners that I've been speaking with, and we hope get this wrapped up before the next city commission meeting.
very good.
Okay, and the third one on here is the interlocal agreement for building department services with the town of Highland Beach. We've been working with them vigorously on this arrangement. Mr. Nazaro has developed an interlocal agreement at this point in time. We've sent it over to the town manager at Highland Beach. Let's see, he's going to discuss it with their commission, and I can't remember when their meeting is. It's the 19th.
The
right?
19th, yes, sir.
At the 19th. So if their commission approves, we could set a special meeting to approve it ourselves if we want to keep it going. And I promise you, I wanted the mayor to go back and look in Rebecca's office back in there. The applications that we have are stacking up. And basically what we're doing is we're advising people that, with their application, most of them are air conditioning and level 1 type applications, but those that have to go to a building department, we believe that we're going to have something in place here with Highland Beach sooner than if they were to submit those to the town of Delray, or city of Delray Beach, and get in the queue over there. So a lot of people are choosing to do that. So.
What about the stuff that's in the queue at Delray?
No, they're pledged to finish those out. Yeah, and I'm not quite sure how many we have that are still in the queue over there, but they are continuing to review those. So Do you want to know any of the details of the ILA?
What's the duration that we're proposing to them?
It's going to be comparable to our existing interlocal agreement, which is until notice is provided to terminate. So it's just going to be a
Just rolling.
continuing.
Right.
And then what do we do? We're using their building permit, the metric.
That's right. So the proposal, after discussions with the manager and the department there, they indicated that they would be willing to process our applications for the same cost as they're doing their own. So that's included in the draft that I sent to them.
And then do we think we're going to have some sort of backlog? I mean, their commission may address, handling if there's I don't think there is, but we have small permits stacked up for minor stuff, but is it, do you foresee any kind of issue with that as far as them, being handed 27 permits?
No, sure. Rebecca has done a good job sort of parsing out things that are sort of easy to send over, and some of the larger projects we're holding off on. So we will have maybe a few more initially, not exactly a deluge, but a number of initially that will be part of what we send over.
Is there any sort of, is their commission going to come back with any sort of priority versus their home permits versus ours, which is something we've never really contemplated? Or
we have not had a discussion about that. What you read in the post.
First serve, if they get it in the
Right.
desk, and that's the way it was
That's the way we're operating now. And I think Marshall, the manager over there, understands.
Nothing has led me to believe that they would be processed in any different way.
And again, that might just be, if something were to happen administrative, that would just be in the near term. Okay.
Maybe want to clarify that though.
Right. Okay.
Very good. Let's move on. ARPB meeting is July 28th at 8:30. Anyone who wishes to attend, let's go back at you, Mr. Dunn, for finance report.
Yes, sir. I think the one thing that I wanted to bring up, and we'll be talking about that actually in the next item, is that Delray Beach is raising our water rates. And for the life of me, I cannot find the handout that we had for the percentages by the years. I think the first year was like 6%. It varied. I don't think it was a percentage increase each year.
No, it's not the same percentage every year. Their rate increase started as of July 1st. It'll be on our next bill that we get. We'll see the rates have gone up 5.32% this year. So they're raising their rates for the next 5 consecutive years. And it ranges about 4.5% to almost 8.5%, I believe.
Each year?
Right. So each year it'll have another increase. I think the lowest that I saw was about 4.5%, and the highest one year was about 8.5%. And I'm just doing that off of memory, but so the next 5 years, the rates are just going to keep going up. So
that's going to be 25 to 35% increase in rates over 5 years.
it is going to be a
I think they're building a new water plant, correct?
So they are.
We are a current water customer. Our agreement ends, I believe, next year. So we are renegotiating that contract. We've reached out to the utility director, Hassan Hajimiri, and he's indicated that he wants to have a meeting this month with our managers to discuss that renewal. So price will certainly be a part of that discussion.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Dunn?
No.
Very good. Chief, police report.
Request that the report be accepted as submitted. Still got a lot of heavy construction going on, keeping us busy. And I believe everybody's aware at this point of the boat that washed up yesterday morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning. We got a call from Customs when the officers responded. Customs and Border Patrol and the Sheriff's Office were already on scene. A little bit of information we could get out of it was the fact that apparently one of the agencies first observed the boat like 7 miles offshore. and they basically followed it into the beach. These people were from the Dominican Republic, 8 people on board. 6 of them they were able to locate. The other 2, they know that one of them got in a cab and left. The driver of the boat got in a cab and left. So that indicates he obviously had it all set up ahead of time, planning for it. And they claim that there was a 85-year-old female on the boat. One of the people that were coming over. So, the boat was removed around noontime yesterday.
The 85-year-old escaped.
The other one, no.
The female escaped, right?
Be awfully spry.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Anything else, Chief?
That's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let's move on now to Resolution 22-03. Mr. Dunn, we just got this yesterday, so
I think, did you?
So this is, no, it was created by Rebecca too. It mirrors our previous resolution, I believe 15/6 it might have been, which just is permitted to set our water rates by resolution. So we have an ordinance that says we can change our water rates by resolution. Given the increase that we're seeing from Delray, Rebecca has gone and adjusted those figures, so we're raising them, I guess, and Rebecca can confirm. That's the same percentage as we're getting an increase from Delray to generate the same amount of revenue to cover the costs of purchasing the water and maintaining the system.
So this is going to match the rate increases we expect to be seeing from Delray.
Yes, sir. But this also does mean that for the next 5 years, I'll be bringing you a resolution. And I would like for this to be eligible for us to go ahead and change the rates on our next water bill, because the town is going to be billed at the new higher rate. So I would like for this to be active for the July billing period, which is on July 31st.
Very good. And that's contained in this resolution, I take it.
So we do have.
This is effective as of today.
Yeah, so Rebecca, if you'd want, we can, you want to just amend it so they shall take effective immediately, including starting July.
Well, I think it says that it starts today, doesn't it?
Immediately upon its
Immediately.
passage.
I just wanted to say, I just don't want to defer it to the next
Okay,
year.
if it's immediate upon passage.
Yes.
You're
Yeah,
covered.
so I think that covers it.
Okay. Ms. Taylor, would you read Resolution 22-3?
A resolution of the Town Commission of the Town of Gulfstream, Palm Beach County, Florida, establishing water rates and charges by resolution as provided in ordinance number 03/4, amending Chapter 34 Utilities at Article 2, Section 34-26 for the operation of the water distribution system for the town, providing an effective date as well.
Thank you. Motion to approve Resolution 22-03.
Motion to approve. Second.
Ms. Taylor?
Vice Mayor Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Morgan?
Yes. All right, let's move on now to the preliminary budget discussion for 22-03.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Introducing this, there are a few things that I do have to read into the record. And so I will do that right now and read as fast as I can. This document is the proposed fiscal plan for the operation of the town of Gulfstream during the next fiscal period. The budget is presented to the town commission in a format that substantially conforms, I should say, to the standards of public financial presentations known as generally accepted accounting principles promulgated by the National Council of Government Accounting. It is intended that this presentation for a review of the budget by the town commission clearly presents the operations of the town and the use of tax dollars and other revenues. The annual operating budget is a basic fiscal document, and once adopted will become the fiscal work program for our community and provide the basis for carrying out the town commission's decisions on policies and programs for the improvement, growth, and orderly maintenance of the town of Gulfstream. As you know, the prominent source of revenue for the town's general fund is the ad valorem tax. For the last 5 years, the town has either lowered its ad valorem tax rate or set it at the rolled back rate. And the results of this has been that for the past 5 years, our general fund revenues have been basically the same. And that's around 4,600,000 to 4,700,000. So we've been operating with really the same general revenue funds for the last 5 years. And the point of that is that all the projects and studies, purchases, and costs of providing services have been accomplished with basically the same amount of revenue for 5 years, even though the costs for many of these services have gone up during that time. Our budget basically has been and will be CIP driven, as you know. But today, I think we will probably have some discussions of whether the town will be able to sustain millage rates set at the rollback rate in future budgets. I mean, Rebecca and I have already had discussions about that. And we'll discuss that with you as the board, the commission here, discuss our millage rate that we perhaps want to set it at. So as you can see, back to the message here, that I've listed our general fund unrestricted fund balances since 2012, and you can see our planning, as our auditor said, has been really directed at building up the fund balance so we can pay for our CIP program. There are a few things that you do have to make a motion on, and I'll save those for after I really finish this discussion. Yours are highlighted in yellow, right?
Yes.
Okay, so those are the things we'll come back and just make a motion on. So I'll say for the existing year, the budget we're in, the ad valorem proceeds from the rollback rate last year, again, as you can see, $4,626,000. And the proceeds using the rollback rate this year, if you choose to do that, would be $4,673,000. Now, ad valorem proceeds at if we were to use the current millage rate that we're in right now, the proceeds would be $5,225,000 or $550,000 more than we project using the rollback rate. Just a couple of other items in the general fund. The final gross taxable value for Gulfstream in 2022 was 1 million, or I'm sorry, 21. No, it should be 22. $1,258,974,000. The estimated gross taxable value for Gulfstream this year is $1,422,841,000. That's a 13% increase, or about $150 million. CIP permitting, major items in the general fund budget is CIP permitting and construction, obviously for the core project. That would be under capital expenditures. And then other items in the CIP, in the general fund are a water valve exercise machine. You can see at $39,000, and that's why, as Baxter Woodman gave their presentation today, I asked about the valves the extra valves that we're going to be putting in, so that we can further isolate the streets and homes in case there's a water main break. This machine exercises those valves. I have Anthony here to maybe kind of briefly talk about that in terms of staff time it takes to exercise, how many valves we have, and the time it takes, how many rotations it needs, how often we have to do it. And I think most towns and cities have this machine and we don't. Anthony, can you just tell us approximately how many valves we'll have?
Yes, Commission, there's a total of 87 valves that we have in town. Oh. We have a total of 87 valves in town. That's including Place au Soleil. They each require different rotations to turn on and off to exercise it. So that way, whatever particles are built up in the system within the valve itself has to be broken up. And that has to be done twice a year by health code. Right now, at the moment, we're doing as many as we can physically by hand. Each one, sometimes it takes 2 people to turn it, just to turn it on and off. And at times it doesn't close it completely. So meaning that the buildup inside of the valve, because of the age of the valve, won't allow us to completely shut the system to a dead halt wherever it is that we're running at. Utilizing this machine, it has a hydraulic system that's built into the machine itself, which allows the machine to push force on the valve when it's closing it and opening and closing it, because it does it by a computer that's on board on the machine itself. What that does is it allows it to exercise it to the point where it's getting ready to shut and then reopen it again and close it again. Running this machine on a valve that's a 12-inch line that we normally have like on A1A takes about 42 turns to close it, and then another 42 to open it again. So if an individual had to do it by himself, and if it was actually operating correctly, it would take about close to about 20 minutes to open and close just that one valve, because it takes a lot of pressure once you get to the end of it to get ready to shut it off. Then you have to reopen it again and then re-exercise again, and you have to do that 4 times just to be able to operate that valve. So it's a long process.
So, and you say that it's the minimum requirements are twice a year, but our plan is to do it more often than that.
More than twice a year, yes, because the more you exercise the valve, the more it stays, the components internally stays lubricated, if that's the word you want to use, because of the water. It allows the valve to operate freely a lot more, as opposed to just letting it sit and not being able to exercise it, because there's so many and you have to do it manually. And with the machine, it cuts the time down.
We've had recent issues with our valves that most of them are not working. So we've had some water main breaks, mainly due to construction.
Yeah.
And we've had to basically shut off
half the town
to do that.
I had to isolate 9 valves just to turn off the isolation, to isolate the break that was next to Mr. Stanley's there on Gulfstream at the new house that they're building.
So fortunately, we've been able to do that without losing pressure and having to have a boil water notice.
Correct.
How much time will it save you per valve?
Per valve, probably about 15 minutes per valve.
So what are you doing now with a crank? You just have a T?
We have a T-handle valve, yes, sir.
You do that and crank that thing 40 times?
Correct.
Okay, so this is an electric device with it running off a generator that's gonna.
Well, it's an onboard engine, kind of like a lawnmower.
Okay.
And it has a hydraulic system that pushes through that engine, and then it allows the valve to open and close with the mechanism that's built into the system.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's actually on an independent trailer. That's a single axle. Probably the valve machine is no larger than the glass table where Mrs. Reed is sitting at right now. So,
but that's one item. Then we have 2 police cruisers and the equipment, as you can see there. Then we have weather-related contingencies, which we put in every year. This past year, we had to use some of that because our windows up here from just a nor'eastern storm leaked. It's the first time since I've been here that they leaked. So we had to dip into that money. So those are a few items. I know we have a truck also in Public Works. I didn't list it on here, that we need to get one of our trucks. Every time I ride in it, I'm afraid the bed is gonna fly off of it. It's been repaired with tape, I guess. So we do have a pickup in here also. And the water fund, as you can see, our CIP permitting and construction, there is $1.6 million. And then I had a discussion of the proposed water rate increase, which we have already had. The capital improvements, I'm kind of repeating things here. We're in the 5th year of the 10-year capital improvement plan, and as Ms. Travis mentioned, year 6 will begin in October of 22. This year's budget is highlighted by bidding, contract development, permitting, and construction upgrades of the system. So that's really the same in both the general fund and the water fund. So I'll move on to the personnel. You can read here that I believe that we've got a very talented workforce and exhibits the skills and commitments necessary to deliver the highest quality of service to its residents. Investing in quality personnel and retaining them is of utmost importance to the town. The staff is recommending a 5% COLA increase for salaries. In addition to the COLA, the staff is recommending a one-time inflation correction that will not be added to the base salary of the individual. The inflation correction will not apply to the town manager, town clerk, chief of police, or the captain of police. Typically, in presenting COLA issues to the town commission, we rely on the CPI for the county, Miami-Dade County, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. This year, that CIP is at 9.6% for April. I mean, okay, so as of April, that CIP for this 3-county area was 9.6. We obviously are not going to recommend that to the town commission. We settled on a 5%, and again with this inflation correction, got to remember we're competing for employees. We have a set of administrative employees here that I think have been together for 8 years, that nobody has left, and that's important to keep good employees on your staff, and it's unusual that you're able to keep them together for a period of 8 years. And so we are competing with other towns and cities. I'll just mention one, the town of Manalapan. This inflation business has really changed the way towns and cities are having to address COLAs. The town of Manalapan back in February passed a 5% COLA increase to the base salary of all of their employees, and then they're going to do another 5% to the base salary of their employees in October, and they're also considering a inflation correction in addition to that. So we are continuing to, we have the 5% and then the inflation correction in these numbers that we provided to you. But towns and cities have really not settled on final numbers yet. I mean, they continue to survey other towns, and that's what we're doing at this point in time. So what I'm suggesting that we have an August meeting, which we don't normally have, to discuss the budget, and in which case we'd be discussing personnel items in more detail than what we have here today for you. Questions? trying to kind of shortcut this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, there's no issue with the rollback rate. We can certainly certify that. But I think what we want to discuss right now is what millage rate we should recommend. Tom Smith, I know that you.
Yeah, I've expressed concern that with our rising costs, especially in the areas of compensation and almost any supplies that we order or need here, I just think that it wouldn't be unexpected for the people, the residents living here, to realize that they may have to pay for that a little bit through real estate taxes or a small increase. I'm not suggesting that we would stay with the same millage rate from the last year, which would raise another $550,000 in revenue, but something between last year's rate and the rollback rate. Well, the 3.6%, which is the prior year millage rate, and the rollback rate, which is 3.2, I would favor at least discussing having something between those two numbers, Mayor. But now I've been assured by the city manager and staff that we don't need to do that we can make the budget without doing so. But if you look at it's not here, but there's a 5-year revenue stream for the town. The last 5 years, we've raised virtually the same amount of money each year, have not increased by doing that, which is a wonderful thing. But certainly our costs have gone up in that 5-year period of time. So I don't want to be argumentative about it, but I think we should at least discuss whether or not, because I'm new to the deal here, whether or not we should have the rate that's someplace between the rollback rate and the prior year millage rate.
I just want to qualify, yes, we did have a conversation, and I think Rebecca and I feel comfortable at the rollback rate this year, but we don't believe that it's going to be sustainable in the near future.
Especially considering Rebecca Travis's updated CIP numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, so one, are the numbers we have here, Rebecca, the 3 million out of the general fund and the 1.6 million out of the water fund, those are consistent with her numbers today so far. It's just the next year it's.
Right. I just don't know. I wasn't anticipating the next 4.5 or whatever it is that she's anticipating. That kind of came out. She gave me full warning before the meeting. And since then I've been thinking it would not be my recommendation to go with the rollback rate at this point, because I think we're going to have to look at long range, and we're going to have to enhance our reserves.
Yeah. So
if we're going to make it without taking out.
I wish we'd have been given a heads up.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we've by the numbers that we generated up to now, we felt like this year we could still do it. But I mean, we just found out at the same time you guys did.
Oh, no, I'm not being critical. I'm being.
We got a 30%.
Yeah, it was the 30% contingency for $3 million.
30% contingency plus the, which most residents don't understand when we were going through the slides an hour ago, is that that's all everybody wants to talk about. But the major function of the project now, even by cost, just looking at the latest breakdown, is the road work and drainage. It's almost like the water main, which is the genesis of the whole thing, has taken it. The total scope of the project has changed when I finally saw it again updated. And then when we've got a top line number, and every contingency that, I shouldn't say every, some of the contingencies that the town has had in past projects, have barely made it.
Yeah, about it. I reviewed some of these numbers. As I'm always the first to admit, my eyes gloss over on accounting documents. But what I saw was from last year to this year, when you take out operating transfers and whatnot, our revenues only increased about $115,000. Whereas the expenses for this year, when you take out construction in progress, rise by over $500,000. And so that just in of itself is your 1.5% increase in revenue and 9% increase in expenses. I don't think we should stay at the rollback rate. Frankly, we don't want to be shocking the residents next year or 2 years from now with a big, much larger tax increase, should that become necessary. I think we should consider keeping the millage rate at last year's rate. That raises the fund difference that I'm seeing between revenue and expenses. And it's not a tax increase, it's the same rate. It's the same tax rate as we currently have. Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, my view is from, and I talked about this with the staff this week, was, obviously when you're an elected official, if you don't use the rollback rate, oftentimes it can be considered a tax increase. But, we're a small town. We got a bunch of things going on. The staff has done, about 18 different things the last 2 quarters that, we haven't really had to deal with in the past. And one of that is working really hard on these contracts. We survive on, we operate a lot of the town with these, third-party contracts, whether it's for water or for, the permitting and all this stuff, and watching those costs and those increase, as opposed to having a lot of stuff in-house, which can be deemed more expensive with cost of labor and whatnot, which we're increasing to keep our current staff. So I haven't really experienced this, and the other commissioners can chime in that, when you talk to the taxpayers, as a town as a whole, both on Placid Slate and here, as long as the residents, are getting what they want. And I think the scope of the project, the CIP, let's say, but the paving and drainage is something everyone's been after us about. It seems trivial, but they are. That we keep it the same, which would result in what, the $550,000 increase.
Right.
So, and again, there's nothing that's restricted. We know what it's for, and if it's unallocated, we're going to use it for something that the residents need. I mean, I think we've got some public safety things coming up sooner than later, but it'll be there. I mean, we all know what the general fund is. This isn't like a super complex budget.
Right. It's not.
$400 or $500 million.
And it's not like we had this conversation with our residents. We have it every year about the CIP program. And when I'm out there on the streets, for one reason or another, I mean, I'll have somebody walk out and say, now, isn't our street coming up this in 6 months? I mean, they're all sitting there waiting for it to happen, because as she mentioned, we have about 20 spots here in the core that just holds water, ponds, and they're all over the core, and people are, I mean, they don't remember what our schedule is, but they know that what we're doing, and nobody has, pushed back on doing these projects.
What's the history of our millage rate in the last 3 or 4 years? Does anybody remember?
We've been at the rollback rate or below the rollback rate for 5 consecutive years.
We've consistently.
We have
gone with the rollback rate.
consistently either used the rollback rate or we've lowered it. And I think out of that 5 years, I think we actually lowered it just a tad 3 of those years.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, our main justification is we're trying to allocate capital in the general fund to cover anything that may happen with the beginning of construction next year.
Right. So the question.
With what we've heard this morning, which was just new this morning, I think has gotten all of us a little bit surprised, and I would be inclined to either use last year's millage rate or something very near it. If you wanted to round it off, but I would favor to not use the rollback rate as next year's rate.
Okay. And again, we apologize. I mean, this was the first time we saw these numbers, not to say that we haven't been asking for them, right?
That's very true.
So.
Do we need to vote on the millage rate this year today? Or is that just something for consideration?
Well, what we need to do is, it's called a proposed millage rate. So we can set it at a rate, and yet we can lower it.
You can't raise it.
You can't raise it from that.
Well, then I would recommend that we set the proposed at the existing 2022 millage rate. I will not be at the August meeting. You can either affirm it or reduce it.
We're going to affirm the rollback rate for sure. That we have to do today.
Right.
Correct.
Correct.
And that's easy.
And then, so if you want to make a motion to do that, that's
Proposed millage is going to be the existing millage rate, which we may determine to
to reduce.
But not
50
increase.
basis points or so.
The other thing I'd like to talk about is the inflation correction. I met with Rebecca and Greg, as a staff. I'm not comfortable with it, and I'll tell you why. And Commissioner Lyons was very involved with this with Rebecca. Rebecca spent a lot of time putting it together, and she deserves kudos and compliments for spending a lot of time creating the percentage numbers based on salary. But I think it's the wrong approach. Our 5% recommended COLA is consistent with other towns, Manalapan perhaps accepted. It is also consistent with the federal government's direction on COLA, which right now stands at for 22-23 at 4.6%, probably will go up to 5%. So that's a good number. Inflation correction in my mind is to alleviate the fuel costs. That's really what's driving everything. That's what's been really skyrocketing. And that is for our employees to commute to work, to have to pay the additional fuel costs, which has doubled since January of 21. I would be more comfortable with an amount of money to compensate our employees across the board, not based on their income. Everybody has to drive to work, for their gas usage. Rebecca put together the number of work days there are. I think it's 246 or some such, and used the IRS number, I think, of 57 cents or whatever it is per mile. And then I think you use 25 miles each way as a commute. I think that's the approach we should take.
Okay.
So that is consistent, would not apply to those employees who will be getting a car allowance, because that seems to me is covered in that. But for those who do not receive it, I think we should come up with a number that will cover the additional commuting costs they experience. As opposed, you may not have all the numbers, but when I looked at the percentage on the inflation correction of salary increase goes from a low of 2.5% to a high of 16% of total wages.
Mm-hmm.
The average is 7%. That's higher than the COLA. And it is, it depends on your salary, but it ends up being an annual amount over like $4,600. And I don't think that's the direction we should be going. We want to protect our employees from the commuting expenses involved. So I put that out there for your consideration in August.
Do we have any idea what those numbers would obviously be smaller than the ones that are projected here? I think the IRS has just changed in the last month their allowance, so it's higher than the 50 cents. It's kind of 63 cents or something. Yeah, but it's just been increased. So when you do your numbers, it's a little higher. Correct.
So whether you apply that to your 50 miles, whether you apply a gas rate and an average mile per gallon of a commuting vehicle and compare it to the January ban, whatever. I just think that's the approach that we should be taking.
Sure, I mean, that's totally doable.
Okay, good. Any thoughts on that? I don't know.
I mean, I guarantee you the employees would appreciate anything that could help pay for the gas and the food bills.
We have the numbers done for one set of numbers, so we could also just see what the spread is too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Next meeting, it's fine.
All right, then our.
Okay, so you need to make a motion just certifying the rollback rate at 32849.
Yeah, is there a motion to certify the rollback millage rate to 3.2849?
I make a motion to certify the 2023 rollback rate at 3.2849.
Second.
Ms. Taylor?
Vice Mayor Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes.
And the next one, you just need to read it. The existing 2022 millage rate is 3.6. So Mayor, if you just read that into the record.
Okay, the 2021-22 millage rate was 3.6724.
Okay, and then we need a motion
Right.
proposing the.
So I make a motion to determine that the proposed 2023 millage rate is 3.6724. That's the proposed rate.
Second.
Ms. Taylor?
Vice Mayor Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes. Our first public hearing on the tentative budget adoption will be September 9th at 5:01. Does that need to be moved? Can I just announce it?
I thought we already did it.
We just announced it, so if we could get a motion for the first and second
All right.
hearings.
And the second public hearing for final budget adoption will be September 21st. Both will be at 5:01 PM according to state directives. Is there a motion to approve those two dates?
Motion to approve the two tentative budget hearing dates, September 9th, 2022, 5:01 PM, September 21st, 2022, 5:01 PM.
Second.
Ms. Taylor?
Vice Mayor Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes. Thank you very much. Any other comments from anyone? If not, it's a
Thank
long
you.
meeting, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
You need to sign this resolution.
Yeah, I missed that one date, so that there's a 21st, this is